Another day and another 5 hours of answering your fantasy football questions. Now, if you're watching this as a video later on, of course, you can drop a comment and hopefully somebody else in the community can help you out and can answer your question. But I will also be live streaming Sunday morning starting at 8 a.m. Eastern. So I should be available to answer your question. Then let's go ahead and let's dive into this. And we are going to be answering these questions through flockfantasy.com. Obviously, if you ever wanted to ask a question, you can always go over to the site, hit the little expert advice button in the top right corner. I mean, I can go ahead and I can pull this up for you in a new window. But yeah, all you have to do is go to the top right corner, hit expert advice, ask a team review, trade question, start sit question. Whenever it's answered in a live stream, you'll actually be sent the exact answer through flockfantasy.com as well, where you'll get the clip of the live stream where your exact question was answered. So you can ask a question, whether you're in the live stream, out of the live stream, not going to attend the live stream, doesn't matter. But let's go ahead and let's dive into our first thing we're going to do here. And that is going to be looking at a free team review. Now, of course, you can get this free team review by taking advantage of the Underdog offer, but that's a different thing. But here looking at it, it's a 12-team league where you start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. This is the Hebrew Heroes. Using the league analyzer, we'll see that there is a pretty even playing field here. I mean, the teams that are 7 through 3 are all pretty damn close. Like, honestly, we're a little bit closer to the teams behind us at 4, 5, 6 than we are to the team up there at 1. But nonetheless, I mean, obviously, being near the top of the league analyzer, definitely better than being near bottom. We are currently 1 and 3, and we're not starting off too hot based off the Bijan Robinson game. Well, hell, I lied to you because we also have Drake London. So let's dive into this. Quarterback, we do have Kyler Murray. I'm looking at Kyler, obviously very disappointing this past week. Thought it was going to be a great matchup against Washington. He face planted, but going into the future, you're still starting Kyler Murray every single week. You still have the rushing upside. Definitely, it is a tougher spot, of course, going up against the San Francisco 49ers. Going over to what we have at running back. You're currently sitting with Bijan Robinson and James Conner. Now, coming into the season, I had Bijan Robinson ranked at RB3. I thought he was going to be that high-end RB1 in fantasy based off the improvement with the overall offense, plus the receiving usage. Well, that looks like it is no longer the case. It looks like it's very hard to project Bijan to be a true top 3 option at the position. I more so have Bijan Robinson now as a low-end RB1 going into the future. Still, you have the safe usage as a receiver. I still believe that he is an extremely talented option. So definitely not a reason to move off Bijan Robinson entirely, but yeah, clearly not the player we drafted him to be. James Conner, RB2. It's a half PPR league, so to be honest with you, I actually like James Conner a little more in this format than we would in a full PPR. We have Rico Dowdle, Trey Sermon, and Trey Benson. Yeah, Sermon, you have the short-term viability. Maybe you have the long-term upside with Benson. You get a relatively nice floor with Dowdle. Going over to the wide receiver position, it's the league where you only start 2 wide receivers in a flex. So typically how we are trying to optimize here is use the depth wide receivers that pop in our lineup as 2-for-1 pieces to upgrade elsewhere. So if we were very strong at the top at wide receiver, I would be very comfortable in going through and telling you, let's trade Dontavian Wicks and James Conner, and let's go get a top end running back because of the format that we're playing in. Now, with that being said, we have the Puka Nacua injury. Jalen Waddle is not viable at this moment, given the injury that you have to Tua. So with no Puka and with no Waddle, presumably, it actually does appear to be a spot where you cannot afford to move on from Dontavian Wicks. Clearly, Wicks is set up to absolutely crush with the situation that you have with both Romeo Doubs as well as Christian Watson. So I actually think that we're going to be holding on to the wide receiver depth here, particularly because we are dealing with the Puka Nacua and Jalen Waddle situations. Going over to tight end, we have McBride. Obviously, with McBride, very exciting spot. I will say, based off this injury lingering a little bit longer than I initially thought, I will be moving McBride down my rest of season rankings just a bit. I probably do prefer Kelsey over McBride now, just given the Rice injury and the Trey McBride injury. I thought McBride would be good to go by this point. Hopefully you started K. Dotton. I don't know. It's very disappointing for Trey McBride to be downgraded. If we do not get any additional news regarding Trey McBride, I would actually be completely fine going through and picking up another tight end off the waiver wire for you to go ahead and play in case you don't have him. But obviously it will be something that we need to continue to monitor here as well. And looking at this team in the whole, I think it's a very strong roster. Obviously, we're kind of all in on the Packers, all in on the Cardinals. Going into the future, there's not really much that we're going to be doing in terms of trades. If this was a situation where Puka Nacua and Waddle were good to go, I would say for sure you'd want to take Wicks and you would want to package him with James Conner to go get a running back upgrade. And then at that point, honestly, with the open roster spot, pick up another running back. But here it's not a spot that you really can, given the fact that you're dealing with the injuries to those two guys. So you are going to have to instead hold on to Dontavian Wicks. You play Wicks this week. You throw Jaden Reed in there at wide receiver 2. Dontavian Wicks in the flex. We start Bijan and James Conner at running back. We may have to panic with our tight end if McBride doesn't play. And then obviously we're going to start Kyler with lowered expectations given the matchup. But I think that should be it for this review. Again, I really do appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way. And let's answer some of the free questions that we have in the live chat real quick. And then we'll, of course, get to more questions that we have on the site. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Let me turn on the fan. Okay, we're going to sweat ourselves out. And shout out Underdog sending the future Best Ball Mania 5 winner a Best Ball Mania shirt today. You know we had to rock it on the stream. You know we had to. But this is something I actually wanted to ask y'all. Zach says Vanderbilt beat Alabama. So to be honest with you, I did not watch the Alabama game. I was having to work. I thought that there would be nothing really exciting to talk about. Alabama comes out, beats Georgia. I don't know if it's the comeback that Alabama allowed Georgia to have that really took the steam out of them. But all I know is hook 'em horns. We are the top team. Nobody, and I repeat, nobody should be disrespecting our Texas Longhorns again by putting us anywhere lower than 1. Okay, let's move this over. Vincent says, Mason, please Bijan or Brees rest of season. You for sure want Brees rest of season. Like, let's go through and look at this. I understand that Brees had a disappointing week this past week and a game that had a really bad environment in a game where the Jets just couldn't move the ball down the field. But let's take a step backwards and let's look at what Brees did through the first 3 weeks. Brees week 1, 18 fantasy points. Week 2, 24 fantasy points. Week 3, 18 fantasy points. And maybe you're going to say, well, Mason, now Braylon Allen's a stud. Mason, now Braylon Allen is the guy actually. Brees played 69% of the snaps this past week. That's 2% lower than the week before. That's 3% lower than the week before that. The snap rate for Brees Hall really didn't go down. The issue that you had with Hall was instead the game environment was gross. The offense was gross. The efficiency was. You still have the consistent usage as a receiver. 6 targets, 8 targets, 5 targets, 5 targets. You should have no hesitation whatsoever ranking Brees Hall as the top 5 running back rest of the way. Now, of course, also going into this past Thursday, I had Bijan Robinson ranked as a top 5 running back rest of way. So should you listen to me? I don't know. Maybe not. But legitimately, like, looking at this, all jokes aside, the reason Bijan moved down our rankings and I was finally willing to throw in the towel is, well, Brees has had 3 games over 18 fantasy points this year. Bijan Robinson hasn't hit that mark a single time. So, yeah, you need to have Brees over Bijan. At least I believe so. Now, Devin says, Daniels or Love this week? I have Dontavian Wicks. You for sure want Jaden Daniels over Jordan Love. The only instance you could ever consider Jordan Love over Jaden Daniels, I mean, I understand the matchup is very good for Jordan Love this week, but the only way that you could ever consider Love ahead of Daniels would be centered around the scoring in your format, where if you're playing in a league where you're getting 6 points per passing touchdown, If you're playing in a league where you are getting a point per completion and you want to be skewed over to those high volume passers, then there you could consider Love over Daniels. But not in a league where you get 1 point per 25 passing yards, and not in a league where you get what? 4 points per passing touchdown? It should be impossible for you to do that. Now let's move this over. Alex says, Dallas or Seahawks defense rest of season. One, I will say that I am by no means an expert when it comes to playing with DSTs in fantasy football. I actually did not play with a DST in my fantasy football league in God knows how long, from like 2017 to this past year. So I don't think you should listen to me when I say this, but what I would say is neither defense with how things stand right now are a defense that I'm starting every single week, regardless of the matchup rest of the season. The Seahawks go up against the Chiefs. I'm going to be dropping the Seattle Seahawks defense, and I'll be picking up a different defensive option. So to be honest with you, the correct answer to this is the Seahawks, because I want to be playing the Seahawks this week, and I don't care about the long-term outlook. Okay. Bulldogs just haven't used kickers for years. Yeah, I didn't play with defenses or kickers for years and years and years. But when we launched the Flock League, I thought it'd be more fun since we were making videos and stuff about it. And I know the majority of y'all play with defenses and kickers, for us to include them. And yeah, honestly, I've been having so much more fun in the Flock League this year now that it's more of like a standard regular fantasy football league that the majority of people would play in. Like for years, almost all my leagues, we've had like 3 wide receivers, 2 flex spots, where things are very deep, right? Where we have no kicker, we have no defense. So you just structure your team in a very different way. But now playing in the shallower redraft league, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. And real quick, we actually just hit 248,000 subscribers on this channel. So thank you so much for everybody who's gone down there and hit that like button and subscribe. I really appreciate you. And Nate's saving us. We have a piece of food in our teeth. Ooh. Thank you, Nate. And no thank you to everybody else in the live chat that figured to allow me to go. How long have we been streaming here? 20 odd minutes, 15 odd minutes, talking with some food. But appreciate y'all. Let's go ahead and let's actually answer the questions on the site real quick. So obviously this is a free team review for the Hebrew Heroes. If you wanted that free team review over there on flockfantasy.com, definitely what I'd recommend doing is taking advantage of the offer that we have with Underdog Fantasy. Or if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you will get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus with promo code FLOCK, you will also be getting a Dak Prescott free pick, more than less than half a total yard. And if you use promo code FLOCK and make that $10 deposit on Underdog Fantasy, you will also be getting a free team review over there on flockfantasy.com. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address. And if you ever wanted to ask a question on flockfantasy.com, or if you get that free team review voucher, you go over to expert advice. Here you can get team review, trade question, start set. But again, if you wanted that team review, I'd recommend going through Underdog. But let's move this over to our next team. I'm stuck. Step Burrow coming out with a massive, massive donor for this. Says, hey, Mason, as you can see, we are injury riddled. I had pick 1 and I traded CMC for Cooks and Pacheco. Oh, dear God. Oh, dear God. Oh, dear God. I've been hammering the waiver wire with replacements. What would you do? Would you hold on to all the injured guys? Or would you trade Pacheco, Rice? We lost Rice here as well. Dear God. Who would you target in any general advice moving forward? Okay. Well, first thing is, we are sitting down here at 10 with the league analyzer. Well behind these other teams at the top. Well behind these top 4 teams. Funny that the number one team here is 0-4. How is that possible? Guess Garrett Wilson's been a bum. Oh, you know what? This is a keeper league that's labeled as Dynasty. So it's actually pulling in the Dynasty values rather than the redraft values. So honestly, when you look at these rankings here with the players and when you look at the league analyzer, it's not super valuable for us to be using it because, like I said, it's labeled as Dynasty, even if this is just a redraft format. So, I mean, even if it's that keeper league where maybe you start to keep one or two keepers, I don't really care. You treat it as if it's a redraft. We're not going to be caring at all really about trying to map out long-term. You'll always have a couple of keepers you're fine with in a keeper league. The only time a keeper league really begin thinking long-term is if you keep 5 or more players. Now, going over to quarterback, we are currently sitting with Dak Prescott. I think Dak's actually a little bit more interesting now than he was previously based off the injuries that you've had to this Dallas Cowboys defensive line. Because I think all of a sudden there's a chance that we are going to expect to see more passing attempts in the second half and higher scoring games overall with this Dallas Cowboys offense. Going over to running back, we have the Jonathan Taylor injury. We have the Isaiah Pacheco injury. And we have the Jonathan Brooks injury that we are all dealing with right now. Now, obviously, it appears that we may be getting Taylor back next week or the week after. We may be getting Jonathan Brooks back next week or the week after. But as things stand, it's a really gross spot with where we're at running back. We're to start James Cook, Antonio Gibson this week. Because we're 2-2, we do have a little bit of leeway here. But going over to wide receiver, we have no Devontae Adams right now. We have no Rashee Rice right now. Ladd McConkey, not really viable right now. So I pray to God that we went through and we started Darnell Mooney. If you started Mooney, hats off to you. No idea how you called it. Would have been phenomenal. Now, looking at this team going into the future, maybe we get Adams back in a week or two. We have no idea. Maybe Ladd McConkey breaks out and is a consistent weekly option for us next week. We have no idea. But as it stands, this team over the next 2 to 3 weeks, it's an uphill battle to just stay alive, to not fall to 2-3, to not fall to 2-4, to not fall to 2-5. So honestly, if you were 3-1 with this team, if you were 4-0 with this team, I would say, you know what, probably makes sense for you to just go ahead, hold on to these injured guys like Taylor, Pacheco, Brooks, hoping that we get the value coming in shortly. But specifically on a team where we need to be thinking about how we can win this week since we are 2-2 with no Taylor, with no Brooks, with no Pacheco, with no Adams, with no Rice, with 5 key injuries here. I think you do probably need to go ahead and sell a player. Now, obviously, if this is a keeper format, we're going to take that into consideration. What I would look to do is I would probably see if we can find a team that's willing to trade for Isaiah Pacheco. Rashee Rice, I don't think you're going to get anything, even if you do try to sell him. But let's go over to this team that's 4-0 and see if they could possibly use the long-term upside of Pacheco. I mean, here, if you could send Isaiah Pacheco and maybe get back a wide receiver in a league where you can start 4 receivers weekly, I think it would be really smart if this team is so fed up and so pissed at Brandon Ayuk. If you could somehow send Pacheco for Brandon Ayuk here, tell him, hey, you're 4-0. You are thinking long-term upside here. You'll get a ton of. If we can sell him on that dream, let's do it. And we can actually have somebody that we are playing right this second and not having to start Antonio Gibson next week in the flex. I think that could be a viable play. I don't know if we could pull it off with DJ Moore. I don't know if we could pull it off with Stephon Diggs, Terry McLaurin, just because these are the guys that have been productive. Where obviously Brandon Ayuk has been, a bum. It's surprising that team's 4-0 with Brandon Ayuk. It's definitely a team where we can't afford to upgrade quarterback. We can't afford to upgrade tight end because of all the injuries that we are dealing with. But yeah, I think the main play is try to squeeze some value out of these running backs that we don't have the clear timetable on. I mean, there's a chance that Pacheco isn't relevant at all. Maybe he comes back 6 weeks from now. Maybe he comes back for the start of the NFL playoffs. Maybe he doesn't come back at all this year. We just have no idea. But if we could try to move off of Pacheco to one of these 3-1 teams, move Pacheco for Dobbins, move Pacheco for Spears, move Pacheco for Swift, move him for Chubb. tell the CMA, you're 3-1. You can think long-term upside where I can't afford to. Hype them up a little bit. This team's 3-1. Obviously, we're not getting Kyron. We're not getting Kamara. We're not getting Najee. Maybe, just maybe, if you really need to go all the way down to Kareem Hunt, we can go ahead and consider that. But the main thing is, I think you're right in that obviously we're going to continue to go through and churn the waiver wire and find these exciting players like Roschon Johnson and Antonio Gibson. But I think to just go through and get a startable option here, particularly in a league where you have a little bit of a deeper starting lineup and you're dealing with 5 key injuries, to go through and move off of Rashee Rice or Isaiah Pacheco to get a viable starter in, even if it's just somebody for our flex on a 2-2 roster on a team that's this decimated, I think you probably have to go through and make that move. Obviously, if it's a league where you keep 5+ guys, then at that point, maybe you reconsider and we think a little more long-term. But I'm operating under the assumption that if this is a keeper league, you're keeping fewer than 5 players, and we are primarily just focusing on trying to win this year. But I really do appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way with this. Let's move this over to our next question. It's coming out from Archer. Says, undecided at who we should run at wide receiver 2 in a flex. Okay, so here next time, my guy, I do really appreciate you going through and asking this question just to make sure you know how this works. You don't even have to type those players that you're considering down in the comment box. You can literally just add the players that you're considering down here, and then I can go through and I can click it and fill it out, and it will send it to you through the site as well. But we need a wide receiver 2 in a flex between Wilson, Wicks, Shaheed, and Leggett. Dontavian Wicks with no Romeo Doubs and no Christian Watson is a must-start player in a great matchup against the Rams. You start Dontavian Wicks. Between Garrett Wilson, Shaheed, and Leggett, I'm not super excited about it, given the really tough matchup that we have for Garrett Wilson. But I do think Wilson is someone you have to start. He is currently 7th in the NFL in targets. It's gross. It's a tough matchup. I believe you have an implied team total of only 19 points for this Jets offense, so it's not super exciting, but I do think you have to run with it. Now, let's go over to our next team review. It's going to be one of those free Underdog team reviews from Madden. Devonta says, I'm 1-3 with what I believe is a league-winning squad. Just bad weeks for my Ayuk and Flowers and an injured Mixon. What do you think about the team, and what moves should we be looking to make, and what running backs do we start this week? So first off, we are near the bottom of the league analyzer. It is a little more of an even league, so it's not like we are completely screwed. Like sometimes we see teams here at the bottom have like half the value of the teams at the top. But yeah, I mean, being 1-3 and then being here at the bottom isn't the most exciting position to be in. It's a league where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So the wide receiver depth isn't going to be a super high priority. In terms of the running backs that we are starting this week, obviously we have no Joe Mixon. So I do think this means we probably start Rico Dowdle and Chase Brown. Braylon Allen looks like a really exciting name, and he does have the elite level ceiling if anything were to occur to Breece Hall. But Breece Hall is currently fully healthy. And on top of that, if we are looking at Breece, I don't know. I mean, it's a really tough matchup for everybody in New York. This is one of the toughest defenses that you could play against. So yeah, we go Chase Brown and Rico Dowdle. And then going over to what we have at quarterback, we have Lamar Jackson. So when we're sitting here with Lamar, I think something that would be easy to say is we don't need a backup quarterback. Like there's no world in which we're ever going through and playing Caleb Williams here. I actually drafted Caleb Williams in the Flock League, and I think it was after week 2 that I went ahead and dropped him. But yeah, I think you can go ahead. You can drop Caleb Williams, pick up another high upside wide receiver off the waiver wire. Just roll with Lamar. You're starting him every week regardless. And then going over to running back, we have Joe Mixon. I'm hoping we get Mixon back next week. I honestly thought Mixon would be back this week, considering he played, he practiced not this Friday, but the Friday before. We have Chase Brown, Braylon Allen, Rico Dowdle. So, this little running back trio, none of them are super exciting with how things stand right this second. But you could very easily see them continue to improve as the year goes on, especially if their situation changes in one way or another. Or say, hypothetically, you end up getting an injury to Zach Moss. Chase Brown's a league winner, and this is a league-winning team. If you get an injury to Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, league winner, league-winning team. Rico Dowdle has enough touches weekly that you can go ahead and start him if need be. Going over to wide receiver, I really like Chase as my wide receiver 1. 12-team format, I'm okay with Brandon Ayuk as my wide receiver 2, but I don't love it. Zay Flowers, I'm okay with as my wide receiver 3, but I don't love it. So if we're looking at this team kind of top to bottom here, I really like the squad with the kind of players that we are rostering. I think the primary issue is maybe we just don't have enough upside here at wide receiver and at running back. When we already have the elite quarterback, Lamar Jackson, I mean, you just get the flexibility, and it's one of the reasons why Lamar is so valuable. But you get the flexibility where you're able to go through and you're able to cut Caleb Williams and start Lamar weekly. Because Lamar is a weekly start regardless of the matchup, I think you cut Caleb, roll with Lamar, pick up an extra wide receiver. That way, hopefully we find somebody who pops. We find the next Dontavian Wicks, and then all of a sudden our flex spot is actually great. Or we find the next Dontavian Wicks, and we can package him with Chase Brown and go get a stud RB2. But yeah, in terms of trades that you make with the team, I don't necessarily see many. I think the just easy spot is to say we need to be rostering as many high-end wide receivers. I mean, as many high upside wide receivers and as many high upside running backs as we can down there on the bench. But thank you again. Really do appreciate you and hope I was able to help you out. But let's move this over for Johnson. It's a trade that they received DJ Moore, and we are getting back Jonathan Brooks and Bucky Irving. It is a team where we have Zay Flowers, George Pickens, Rashid Shaheed, Jordan Addison, Wan'Dale Robinson. So we have a bunch of depth at the wide receiver position, but we don't particularly have that bona fide stud wide receiver. So to be honest with you, I don't really understand the trade a ton with exactly why we are doing it. But you have the long-term upside with Jonathan Brooks here. Bucky Irving obviously has the potential to take over as the starting running back in Tampa. Can y'all spam the chat? What side would y'all rather have? Would y'all rather have DJ Moore or Jonathan Brooks and Bucky Irving? And Darcy, Evan Ingram is out this week, so you're going to be going with Tucker Kraft. David Njoku's playing, but Evan Ingram's out. Please play Tucker Kraft. DJ Brooks, DJ Brooks, DJ Brooks if you're 4-0, Brooks at this point, DJ Brooks if you can wait. Yeah, I think it's a fair deal, and it is kind of up to you. I do see the long-term upside with the rookie bags. I just figured you could get a little more value for DJ more than this, but I probably do prefer the running backs if we're just hunting upside. Now, Jonesy coming out with a start set, so we actually get a little bit of a sneak peek of their team. So this is a league where you start 3 running backs, 3 receivers, and 2 flex spots. If this is a league where you start 3 running backs and 2 flexes, you take the 2 running backs. We easily go Jonathan Brooks in that instance. But yeah, right now, looking at the players that we can get into the starting lineup, Jordan Addison would be the main guy that stands out. I'm not playing Addison over Flowers. I'm not playing Addison over Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm not playing Addison over Pickens. I'm not playing Addison over DJ Moore. In terms of Jordan Addison versus Rashid Shaheed, I know most people would prefer Shaheed. I'm a little bit worried that we are going to see this Saints offense come back down to earth this week. You have an implied team total of 18.5 points for the Saints. I have Shaheed and Addison in the same tier. I definitely think like this would be the spot you would potentially switch. Going ahead and pulling this up, Jordan Addison currently is higher, lower, 38.5 receiving yards this week. Shaheed's 48.5. So you know what? Ignore me. I need the little sneak peek behind the curtain. Your boy's willing to admit when he is way off base. You do have a low implied team total with the Vikings as well. So my pride is not too high at all. I know I'm an idiot. I'm completely fine to go through and update the rankings this week and put Shaheed ahead of Addison if we do not have it that way already. Okay. Where did we have these guys previously? We had Shaheed at 34, Addison at 33. Let's flip them. Yeah, I think you go Shaheed over Addison. Okay. Now let's move this over to our next question. This is coming out from Jawit Hoodie. Happy to see you. This is Chuba Hubbard versus Austin Eckler. Hey, Mason, don't know if my trade for Singletary was worth it, but I offered Eckler for Hubbard. I think I would rather have Chuba Hubbard. You can make an argument that when Brooks is back in, Austin Eckler will outscore Hubbard going into the future, but realistically, I know you can start Chuba Hubbard this week. Austin Eckler, I have no idea if you're ever going to be looking to start him. Like in the Flock League, I will look up right now who has Chuba Hubbard, and I will offer them Eckler for him right now. This is actually the editor of this channel. I will send him Eckler for Chuba. Actually, let me know in the live chat. Should I do this? I think it gives me a much better shot to win this week. It's a full PPR format. Who would y'all rather have? Would y'all rather have Eckler or Chuba Hubbard? Eckler or Chuba Hubbard in the chat. Looks like most people are on the Chuba side as well. Okay. Obviously, I mean, if Brooks wasn't coming in, it would be Chuba Hubbard by a mile. The expectation with this trade is you're possibly getting a 0 when Brooks is back. Well, let's go ahead and let's send it, and I will let you know if we get an accept. But yeah, if you look at my rankings, I do have Chuba Hubbard ahead of Austin Eckler. Now, maybe if you didn't need to start either guy this week, like if you were saying, oh, I'm not even going to start Chuba, then maybe you consider Eckler. But Brian Robinson is good to go. Okay. Now, Hoodie Mock coming out. Wide receiver, Wicks is going to be a must-start name with no Dobbs, with no Watson. You have to start Brandon Ayuk with the highest implied team total in the NFL. Going over to tight ends, Kincaid, easy start. Running back, we have no Pacheco. Brees going to be a must-start player, even if you lower expectations based off matchup. DeAndre Swift, on the other hand, has a phenomenal matchup. We'll throw DeAndre Swift at running back too. And then looking at the flex, this isn't the easiest spot in the world. I'm going to go with the player that's been extremely disappointing over the past 2 weeks with Zay Flowers. If you are looking at Flowers, it's a wide receiver that's, yes, he's given you back-to-back games, I believe, under 6 fantasy points, where Lamar's only attempting 15, 18 passes. This week, it may be a little bit of a different situation where you have a top matchup going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, where Lamar is... my editor just took me back. He said, how am I supposed to do a 1-for-1 deal with you and I get my rankings from you? Good point. But anyway, yeah, when Lamar is forced to throw the ball a little bit more with Cincy here, I think you can go ahead. I think you can take Flowers. Now, Ginu says, Neighbors and AJ out. Pollard on bye. I lost last week by 1 point. We're 2-2 in a double flex format. Appreciate you. Big week. I think we're going to go ahead now that you have no Evan Ingram. I think that you continue to see a ton of targets be funneled between the top 2 receivers in Jacksonville. Brian Thomas, somebody you have to jam in. We're going to start T. Higgins as well in what should be a higher scoring game environment against the Baltimore Ravens. Going over to our running back position, I would start. It's either going to be down between Tracy or Austin Eckler. If you're looking at my rankings for this week, I mean, I'm currently sitting with Tracy at 27, Eckler at 26. I have them legitimately back to back here. Going over to what we have with the underdog picks. Eckler, higher, lower, 39.5 total yards. Higher, lower, 2 receptions. Tracy, higher, lower, 65.5 total yards. Higher, lower, 2.5 receptions. We assume that Eckler would get squeezed for touchdowns by both Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson. So you know what? Let's go Tracy. I'll move Eckler behind Tracy in my rankings. It's good for Brian Robinson and bad for Eckler that Brian Robinson gets cleared today and not tomorrow morning. And then for the flex, we can drop Jeremy McNichols. And we're going to go ahead. We're probably playing JSN. Between JSN and Zay Flowers, I personally think it's very close. If you're looking at my wide receiver ranks for the week, I have Zay Flowers 27 and JSN 29. Going over to the underdog picks this week. You know what? I guess you're not going to have the really pressure to air it out in Seattle as you've had in the past, knowing that the spread on this game with the Giants is about a touchdown. So yeah, let's stand by our rankings. Let's go Zay Flowers there. And let me update my rankings on the Tracy end of things and move Tracy ahead of Austin Eckler. Now that you have Brian Robinson cleared, good to go. All right. Now let's move this over to our next question. This one coming out from GSOT. Says Smith and his 7th round pick next year for Thomas and my 4th. If this is a keeper, if this is a dynasty format, it's easily going to be the Brian Thomas in the 4th side. If it is a redraft format where both these players are getting redrafted next year, I do think that there'll be a big enough gap between these receivers long-term to go with Devonta Smith. The value between a 4th and a 7th isn't massive. And I do think that Smith is ahead of Brian Thomas in my tiers rest of season. Now, Chief Reefer coming out with a start set. Always happy to see you. We're looking at running back between Charbonnet, Ford, Braylon Allen, Rico Dowdle. Nick Chubb has been ruled out. So we are going to go ahead. We are going to take Jerome Ford. And going over to the flex, yeah, we are good to go to just jam in Dontavian Wicks. Not playing any of the running backs over Wicks. Teresa, happy to see you. And yes, beautiful, beautiful tumbler. Only thing we've probably drank out of the live stream past week. Or whenever we got it from you. Thank you again. But moving this over for AJH. Wide receiver, it's between... Oh, first off, phenomenal call starting Drake London. Since we started Drake London, instead of chasing upside, what we're going to be looking for instead is we just kind of want a decent floor. And if we are looking for that decent floor, I'm willing to go Terry McLaurin over Tyreek Hill. In a vacuum, I think we have Tyreek Hill ranked 2 spots ahead of McLaurin. But if we already had the London blow up, I don't really care. We're going to go Bowers with no Adams. He should have a considerable amount of targets. Najee Harris, a must-start player as well, considering what you have with the game environment. Probably bad weather where they're going to run. No Warren, no Patterson. And then going over to the flex, I think we are probably going to end up taking Jerome Ford. Looking at Jerome Ford versus Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, going back to like the thing that we were talking about with Drake London, I do think that Tyreek probably has a higher ceiling than Jerome Ford does. However, if we already had London's 30-plus point game, we really don't need to be considering the high-end range of outcomes for these players. And I would almost rather than just have the guy with the higher baseline floor based off the volume that he is going to see. So can y'all spam the chat? If you started Drake London on Thursday night, for your flex spot, would you start Tyreek Hill or Jerome Ford? You started London, so your team's already crushing. Would you go Ford or Tyreek? Okay. Looking at this, we got Tyreek, Ford, Tyreek. If you look at my flex rankings this week, I had Tyreek Hill at 28. I had Jerome Ford at 36. So I do have Tyreek over Ford in a vacuum. We'll stand by it, especially if we're playing it safe up at the top with McLaurin. But yeah, obviously I have Tyreek ahead of him in a vacuum. Maybe I'm overthinking it, thinking if we already had the London blow up, Ford gives us a decent floor. But Antonio coming out says, considering Waddle and Whittington in the flex spot too. By the way, love you, Mason. Been riding with you for 2 years. Much love, my guy. Thank you so much. And looking at this here, Keon Coleman is probably the most exciting player on the bench for me. Josh Downs is super exciting as well, based off the news that we have with Joe Flacco. Going over to running back, we need a high ceiling in this flex because Tyler Algier and Trey Sermon are our RBs. I'm assuming we don't have the Downs pick yet because it's not official. Actually, Underdog's already putting him out there as if Flacco's the starter. They have Downs higher, lower, 49.5 receiving yards. They have Keon Coleman higher, lower, 40 right now. The higher on 40.5 is probably one of my favorite picks of the week on Underdog. But yeah, the assumption is we get Flacco. You probably go ahead and you probably have Josh Downs over Keon Coleman. Obviously, if Anthony Richardson is the starting quarterback, then you panic and you pivot to Keon. But yeah, let's update that. If we can really assume that Flacco is the guy, I had Josh Downs at 31 and I had Keon Coleman at 37 as well in our ranks, if that helps. Now, let's move this over. This is going to be a free team review from I Am the Sinnott. We will get this going in just 1 second, my guy. Excuse me, let me answer some of the free questions in the live chat. I know if you're watching this with the clip later, it's going to send you to this point. Just like skip forward until you see us pull up your team full screen. But if you have any free questions you want answered in the chat, please drop them down below. I'd be happy to answer as many as I possibly can. Edgar says, Trey Tucker, Josh Downs, Jordan Whittington need to start too. I'd go Trey Tucker and Josh Downs. So whenever I'm saying like, oh, Trey Tucker's not exciting, don't start Trey Tucker, that's in comparison to some of like the other wide receivers that were drafted in middle rounds that you know what you're going to get from, like Amari Cooper. Like in comparison to like the other waiver wire options, like Trey Tucker versus Jordan Whittington, there I'm completely fine saying that Trey Tucker has the upside. And there I'm completely fine if anybody wanted to go through and start Trey Tucker. My issue with Tucker and why we've been hammering in how bad this offense is and blah, 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 is just surrounding what we have with people asking me like Tucker or Amari. Or even Tucker Waddle. It's like, yeah, Waddle's in a garbage offense, but so is Trey Tucker. So what are we talking about? Obed says, do you follow any college ball? Primarily follow my school, Hook'em Horns. Hook'em Horns, my guy. But yeah, I'm not super big into college football during the season. We dive into a lot of the rookies coming in the NFL in the offseason for dynasty fantasy football purposes. But during the season, obviously, we're just working so much that it's very hard for me to, like, I can follow college football as a fan, but it's hard for me to do much more than that. Like, I didn't even get to see the Alabama game. I didn't even see that Alabama lost until like right before we started streaming. Which can we talk about that for 1 second? Because I'm definitely going to watch some highlights of the game after I'm done with the stream, but can y'all let me know what's happened with the Alabama game? Lev says it's not allowing me to sign up to flockfantasy.com. Is there a fix for this? If you're having any issues with flockfantasy.com at all, I haven't heard of that issue, but you can send it in the site issues section of the Discord. The developer's always there helping people out with their issues. So yeah, send in the site issue section of the Discord, and one of the developers of flockfantasy.com would be happy to help you out. It's just they choked, party in Nashville, Bama washed. 40-35. Vanderbilt this year went to overtime with Virginia Tech, got blown out by Tennessee, got blown out by South Carolina. Actually, no, I'm sorry. We're looking at 2023. I guess they barely lost to a ranked Missouri team in overtime. Lost to Georgia State. Interesting. Miguelito says, hook 'em horns, exhausted as bro remembers he's about to stream for 4 more hours. And we're just warming up. I'll hit my stride soon, don't worry. I know people don't care about this at all, and it just sounds like I'm trying to flex on y'all, which I promise I'm not. But it's like running. I typically try to run like 10 miles a day. In the first like 2 to 3, I always feel so bad you wouldn't believe. Like I feel like I'm going to throw up. My stomach hurts. My legs hurt. And then once you hit like the 3 mile mark, it's like, oh, okay, this is easy. That's how the streams are. The first 45 minutes, it's warming up. We're loosening the legs. We're loosening the lungs. Then we're good to go. Okay. Kendall says, Ramondre or Gibson? Rest of season, I probably stand by Ramondre Stevenson. I have Ramondre in the Flock League. I'm really hoping he does do this, but thinking that maybe, just maybe, this is a spot where the coaching staff is quote-unquote punishing him for the fumbles, that Gibson gets to start this week. Ramondre may be the guy in the long term. Then beyond that, I'm going through and I am taking Antonio Gibson for this week. Like, we can't hear Antonio Gibson's the starting running back and then take that as, oh, okay, I'll start Ramondre Stevenson. Like, we can't do that. Okay. Yeah, if you're having any issues to flockfantasy.com, like I said, send it in the site issues section. Now, Toxic says Trey Sermon or Xavier Legette in the flex. I will go Legette in the flex. I'm sorry, I will go Sermon in the flex over Legette based off what we have with Anthony Richardson news. I think Sermon does get the bump up with no Anthony Richardson here. When you have no AR, you should have more checkdowns to the running back position. Not only will you have more checkdowns, but at the same time, you will be less concerned about the quarterback vulturing rushing touchdowns at the goal line. So I think you can take Anthony Richardson. Okay. I love this one from John. John is actually our local Oklahoma resident. John lives in Norman, Oklahoma. Says, what do you call a Sooner with half a brain? Gifted. I love it. Love it. Subtract says, if David Njoku doesn't play, do I go Parkinson or Gesicki? I believe David Njoku is good to go. Let me double check for y'all. But last I saw, David Njoku's good. Ooh, we just got a CMC updates. Let's go ahead and let's look at this. Christian McCaffrey won't return week 6 despite being eligible. Timeline to return remains uncertain. Rappaport, Rashee Rice planning to undergo arthroscopic knee procedure early next week. Timeline to be determined. Potential outcomes, damage to PCL, LCL, no ACL tear, torn ACL, limited damage that doesn't require surgery. How do we not know about this yet? Obviously, your boy has a basic level biology degree, did not go to medical school, went to YouTube school instead. So obviously I'm an idiot. I have no idea. Potential Devontae Adams trade updates. Used the Jets as his top choice. Saints have been the most aggressive. Saints would be interesting. Bills, Steelers have monitored closely. Should be healthy enough to play next week. Browns have no plans to trade Amari Cooper. Doesn't really mean anything. If they were going to trade him, it's not like they want to scream from the rooftops. Hey, everybody, we're going to trade Amari Cooper. David Njoku expected to play week 5. Yeah, so you can go ahead and get David Njoku in. But, yeah, let's move this back over to the questions that we have on the live site. Obviously, if you ever wanted to get a guaranteed answer to any of your questions, you can always do so on flockfantasy.com. Just go over to flockfantasy.com and click the little Comment button in the top right corner that says expert advice. You get a team review, trade question, start sit question, whatever you are wanting. If you wanted that team review, like I said, you definitely want to take advantage of the offer that we have with Underdog Fantasy. Or if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you will also be receiving a free Dak Prescott pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tomorrow night. And you'll get a free team review through the live stream through flockfantasy.com that we are doing every single day. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your Underdog account. That way I know who to hook up with that free team review voucher. Now let's pull this up. I am the Sinnott. Here, this is a sleeper team. You should be able to link a sleeper team with the site, my friend. If you're having any issues, please send them in the site issue section of the Discord. You can find the link in the description. But yeah, I mean, even if you're not going to submit your team again, still link it. That way you can use all the free tools that we have. Going through, looking at the league settings here, this is a super flex start 8 league. So this is super interesting. Couple different things. One, I've played in Superflex leagues since I want to say 2017. Like 2017 probably was the first year that Superflex was the format I was playing in more than one QB. But in almost every instance, it's a Superflex Dynasty League. And in a Superflex Dynasty League, you're going through and you're also starting 3 wide receivers and 2 flex spots. So while quarterback's extremely important, it's not like it's making up a crazy percentage of our starting lineup output. Where if this is a league where you only start, say, 2 total receivers, 1 flex, and then the super flex, quarterbacks are massive. Massive, 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 massive. So here to have Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, both QB1s, Daniels the high ends, Burrow maybe the mid to low ends. We're super excited about it. It gives us a significant edge over our league mates. Here, wide receiver does not matter nearly as much, particularly the depth as well. And that's actually is a dynasty league, I believe, because you say Luter's Dynasty. And it does have rookie picks as well. So it's a shallower dynasty format overall. It definitely feels like the amount of bench spots that we have and the starting lineup is more resembled of a redraft team. So effectively what we want to do here in Dynasty is those 3rd, 4th round rookie picks, those late round rookies are not nearly as valuable as they would be in other Dynasty formats where you just have more spots on your roster to get them in. Here you're actually instead a little more incentivized to go through and tier up and make 2-for-1 deals and go studs and duds more so than you'd be in a regular Dynasty League, just because it is a little bit thinner here at the top. So quarterback, love to see Burrow, love to see Daniels. Not only are they QB1s in the short term, they're QB1s in the long term. QB3, not super strong, but not the end of the world. Going over to running back, we have Kenneth Walker, RB1 in the short term, and young enough to presumably have that role in 2025 as well. Obviously, never a guarantee with any running back in Dynasty. We have Jonathan Taylor for the short term and long term. The Taylor injury negatively impacts us, but Jordan Mason is good to go as the fill-in for right now. So honestly, running back is perfect for a contending team. Wide receiver, we have Harrison, cornerstone asset. We can build around him in the short term and long term. We have Chris Godwin as a contending piece. We have Olave as that cornerstone piece. We have T. Higgins. This is a phenomenal team. We even have Chase Brown here as running back depth. It doesn't look like we have too much depth. We're about to get Nick Chubb back from the IR. This is a great squad. If we were to do anything with this team, what I would look to do is maybe go to some other teams in your league that are looking like they are falling off and they are approaching things more from a 2025 and beyond perspective. you can look at the possibility of sending them Kenneth Walker and getting back like a true elite running back like Saquon Barkley. Because if you're able to bring in Barkley here, while yes, maybe we sell a little bit of that upside that we have in 2025, 2026, running backs are still very difficult to project in the long term anyway. And on top of that, if we are looking at the Kenneth Walker for Barkley move, obviously this is dynasty. It would then give us Barkley, Jordan Mason in our lineup, alongside the two elite level quarterbacks, alongside plenty of depth. Jonathan Taylor presumably in the flex spot. This is a team that you can definitely look to sell future picks because we're strong enough to. There's just no reason to, right, at this point, as we don't need depth. Now, of course, if we end up getting an injury to, say, Jaden Daniels, and all of a sudden, crap, we're screwed at QB and we need to go and solve the position somehow. And then at that point, we can go through and we can sell, say, a future first to bring in a quarterback like Dak Prescott to help fill in and help us win right now. That is something we can do, but I'm going to be holding on to the picks just in case we have an injury, because as things stand, I think you're in a great spot to not really make any moves. I think it's a great team where we can just sit on our hands, collect paychecks, and if you wanted to pivot off of Kenneth Walker to somebody that's maybe a little bit better in the short term, but not as good as in the long term, that is something we can do on such a strong contending build. But Hurts so good, coming out with an insane $100 dono. This is Neurologic. This is a longtime member of the flock. Really do appreciate you. Says, good morning, Mason. Missed the super chats. This is much better, though, to be honest. I really do appreciate you. I do think it's a lot better as well in terms of, one, I get to see all the league settings. Two, at the same time, even if you're not able to make the live stream, we can still send you your answer directly through the site. So with the super chats, we had people like super chatting, then having to wait 45 minutes, having to wait an hour to see their question. And if they had to leave the live stream for whatever reason and missed it, then it would just be impossible for them to find. Here with the setup through the site, it gets sent exactly to you. So even if you ask a live stream, I think you asked this earlier today, and you ask a question, you're not even able to make it to the live stream, it doesn't matter because the clip will get sent to you anyway. So I don't have to feel bad thinking that people may have missed their answer. And also, if you did a $100 super chat, YouTube takes 70% of it. Whereas flockfantasy.com, that number's at 0%. So I think it's a much better product. I think it's a lot better for the people not wanting to make sure that they're not missing questions. And it's just not viable in my mind for us to continue to do super chats and say, hey, this year, y'all are going to have to wait an hour and a half. Ask a super chat and then stick around in this live stream for an hour and a half if you want me to answer your question. Which obviously is not a reasonable thing for me to ask up people. Now, let's move this over to check out the team. Like I said, I appreciate you sticking with us for so damn long. This is a 12-team league where we start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So the wide receiver depth isn't a super high priority. In general, when we get the ability to, we want to go through, we want to be selling wide receiver depth in 2-for-1 deals to get upgrades elsewhere in the lineup. Looking at this squad right now, we have the elite quarterback with Jalen Hurts. I actually don't mind the streaming option of Trevor Lawrence this week, where if you are looking at Lawrence, you have a 24.5 point implied team total for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So sportsbooks are effectively saying that the Jags offense projects to be better now than they have pretty much at any point this year. So I'm fine with the streamer. Obviously, when we get Jalen Hurts back from the bye, then at that point we cut Trevor Lawrence. Going over to what we have at running back, we have Taylor out in the short term, Dobbins out this week with the bye, Jonathan Brooks out in the short term. Thank God we were able to pick up Trey Sermon. We're rolling out Trey Sermon, Rico Dowdle. It is very scary on a 1-3 team because obviously the last thing we're ever wanting to do here is fall to 1-4. Sermon can fill in a little bit for us. Going over to wide receiver, we have to deal with no A.J. Brown this week as well, which will be extremely frustrating. Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, Jalen Waddle. Xavier Legette, Jacoby Myers, Wan'Dale Robinson. So this week we're starting Debo, Higgins, and probably either Myers or Wan'Dale, given the injuries that you have to Adams and dear God, we have no Evan Ingram either. You have just been decimated with injuries. This is a spot where I think you have to sell an injured player and you have to get somebody in here to help us out right now. I think you need to go through. I think you need to package together, say, Xavier Legette and Jonathan Taylor. These guys that have a ton of long-term upside. I think we have to get a bona fide stud running back in right this second. Because if Taylor misses this week and he misses next week and we fall to 1-6, then it simply may not matter if Taylor comes back afterwards and just absolutely crushes. So, I mean, looking at this, if you could add a significant wide receiver and pivot over to Kyron, Derrick Henry, obviously Achan's not super exciting considering the fact that we're waiting for Tua as well there. That's more of a long-term upside play. But if we can add to Jonathan Taylor to get to Barkley, Brees, Kamara, Gibbs, Kyron, Henry, I think we do it. Of course, some of these running backs are on buys, such as Gibbs and Barkley. That wouldn't stop me because while, yes, we would have the issue this week where we would still be pretty thin and that wouldn't solve it, you're still getting an extra few games because Jonathan Taylor has the bye week in week 14. So even if you go, okay, well, that doesn't help me this week. Well, at least it helps us in week 5. We get an extra viable game from them in the regular season, boosting our odds of making it to the fantasy football playoffs. Because at this point, what we kind of want to be focusing on is we kind of need to be focusing on just making it to the playoffs. So wide receiver, we have A.J. Brown, Debo, Higgins to build around. I think you send Legette and Taylor to get the best running back you can. If they say no to that, I think you try to send Waddle and Taylor to get the best running back you can. Obviously, we're going to have to drop somebody for Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram's replacement. Ingram just got ruled out this week. So if you were able to make that tier 4 deal before the Sunday games kick off, then it kind of solves things where we front load a little more of this running back production to stay in the fight. And we open up another roster spot where we don't have to drop one of these exciting wide receivers. But if you do end up having to drop one of these exciting receivers, I think the guy that you end up dropping here is sadly probably Wan'Dale Robinson. Obviously, if you can't get anything for him, there's a good shot that maybe you could, which definitely that is plan A, right? Plan A would be to go ahead and try to sell Wan'Dale Robinson and get an upgrade elsewhere. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you and really hope that we were able to help you out in some way with this. But yeah, and yeah, for love of God, let's go to 2 and 3. Let's not fall to 1 and 4. But let's move it over to our next question coming out from Marcos. Here at wide receiver, we have Thomas and Amari. If we want to get anybody in, it would be Legette. You have no Neighbors Watson this week. I'm not playing Legette over either option. Ferguson looks like a must-start tight end. A running back, our best option would be Tracy. We're not playing Tracy over Mason or Achan. Between Legette and Tracy, I'll take the guaranteed touches of Tracy. Am I super excited about it? Not really. But I don't know. It is what it is. It is what it is. Now, Jawit Hoodie coming out with the start set. Says we're deciding between Keon Coleman and Trey Sermon right now. I think Wan'Dale Robinson, Keon Coleman's a conversation to have as well. Currently on the site, we don't want to look at rest of season. Let's look at week 5. I have Wan'Dale at wide receiver 30. I have Keon Coleman at wide receiver 37. So not too far apart. I do think we probably go Wan'Dale. Like, again, looking at what you have on Underdog. Like, one of my favorite picks is Keon Coleman, higher than 49 receiving yards. But you have Keon Coleman, higher, lower, 47.5. Running back, Sermon and Singletary. No Singletary, so Sermon's really... So really the only thing that we have to think about is Keon Coleman or Trey Sermon. Like I said, I'm a little more excited about Sermon now that you have no Anthony Richardson. Sermon, they have higher, lower, 49.5 total yards. Sermon a little more likely to score the touchdown than Keon. It's a full PPR format where the receiving usage does matter a decent bit. Who would y'all start this week? Would y'all go Keon Coleman with no Khalil Shakir, or would y'all go Trey Sermon? You probably got to go Trey Sermon. I'm not even asked chat. We know it's Trey Sermon. We go Sermon. I'll save the chat for another question. Kai Fly says, hey, Mason, need a sit one. Oh, dear God. I made a massive mistake. I left the tiniest bit of muscle milk in there overnight, and I threw water in it thinking I could drink water. Oh, that is disgusting. Oh, that is disgusting. But Kai Fly says, hey, Mason, need a sit one. Higgins, Wilson, Brian Thomas, and Wicks. Who are you on? Ooh. Brian Thomas Jr. is more exciting now that you have no Evan Ingram. Brian Thomas is more exciting now than he was previously with no Evan Ingram. Garrett Wilson is definitely the guy I want here rest of season. The issue is the matchup's really bad this week. Higgins had 10 targets last week. Should be in the best offense out of this list. Dontavian Wicks, you have no Romeo Doubs, and you have no Christian Watson. Can we just get a baseline expectation to see if any of these guys look like outliers? Wicks, higher, lower, 56.5 yards. Higgins, higher, lower, 52.5. Wilson, higher, lower, 56.5. And Brian Thomas, higher, lower, 50.5. If you looked at my rankings this week, I believe we had Brian Thomas the lowest out of this list. We had Higgins 20. Well, actually, no, never mind. I forgot we moved up. We had Thomas lower if you looked at the rankings in the videos, but earlier today we moved up Thomas once he had Evan Ingram rolled out. Higgins, Wicks. I think I benched Dontavian Wicks. It sucks. It's a great matchup. He had 13 targets. You have no Dobbs. You have no Christian Watson. I want to be playing Dontavian Wicks as much as I can. I don't know if that is the spot I want to be doing so, though. I will tell you right now, most people in the chat would say to play Dontavian Wicks over Garrett Wilson. I am just mentally not strong enough to do so, and Wilson's 7th in the NFL in targets. Now, KV says 0-4 want to possibly shake it up this week. Could also do something involving getting Jacobs. So, HN to Breece Hall on an 0-4 team makes a lot of sense. Olave to Dontavian Wicks is an obvious massive downgrade. I think we go Breece and Wicks primarily because we are not thinking about the long-term upside on an 0-4 roster. And I'm thinking about how I can go ahead and how I can move to 1-4. I'm thinking of how I can move to 2-4. And I don't know if that's going to be happening with Devon Achane and the injury that we have with Tua. So I'd probably rather just lock in a little bit of hope here with Breece Hall. Hesitation is tough matchup this week. But obviously, beyond that, it's not going to be the end of the world. It should be a good offense. Now, Jazzy Bath coming out with a start set. Here at wide receiver, we have no Puka. We have no A.J. Brown. We have no Tua for Waddle. We have no Calvin Ridley. So I'm not really considering Waddle here. It's Thomas, JSN, and Dontavian Wicks. I would want Brian Thomas Jr. and Dontavian Wicks there at receiver. And then for the flex, we have JSN, who we were looking at previously. And you add in effectively just Mondre Stevenson and Zach Charbonnet. There, I would prefer to have JSN. I mean, over the past 3 weeks, he's played over 80% of the snaps for Seattle. And obviously, this is an offense that's been throwing the ball a ton. You do expect that to come down a bit, however, with the matchup against the Giants. Now, Evie Freeman coming out with our next question. Where wide receiver, our best option to get in would probably be Brian Thomas Jr. We already played Drake London, so we are more so focusing on the floor rather than the ceiling. So we have Wicks, Hunt, Thomas to choose from. We went back and forth between Thomas and Wicks previously. The Underdog Pick'ems have Wicks as the option. I just the thing is, and I know it sounds dumb, thinking that Evan Ingram has an impact on the projections that you should have for Brian Thomas. It very easily could be dumb. But let's look up the Jags box score that we've had over the past 2 weeks. This past week against the Houston Texans, we had 33 total pass attempts for Trevor Lawrence. And you had 9 targets for Brian Thomas and 12 targets for Christian Kirk. So these guys collectively accounted for 2/3 of the entire Jacksonville Jaguars receiving. If we go ahead and look at what you had, say, against the Bills. This is in the environment with no Evan Ingram. We have 19 total targets between the two receivers. 19. The target volume has been significant. It has been getting funneled through. You have a 24.5 point implied team total. I do think that Brian Thomas Jr. is a more explosive receiver than Wicks, even if Wicks is a very talented option. I'm going to go Thomas, but can y'all spam the chat? Would y'all rather Brian Thomas Jr. or Dontavian Wicks this week? One thing that is boosting me over to Thomas a little bit more as well is this is a 24.5 point implied team total that you have for the Jags. So sportsbooks are giving the Jacksonville Jaguars more credit right now than they've pretty much had all year. We got Thomas, Wicks. So it does look like most people are in on Thomas with me, but it's close. Now, Asani coming out says, Montgomery on bye this week. So starting Hunt with Roschon and Mostert on the bench. Not sure who to start at the flex. Okay. So Hunt with Mostert and Roschon on the bench. Oh, for sure we do it. You have no Clyde-Edwards-Helaire, which actually boosts them up a bit. Downs looks very appealing now that you have presumably Flacco under center for Indy. I think I would go with Josh Downs over Tank Dell, to be honest with you. If Anthony Richardson does play, you pivot from Josh Downs to Tank Dell, but we're assuming you have Flacco. Now, Chris coming out of the start set says, who at the flex between Wandell, Kirk, or Dontavian Wicks? Okay. So Wandell's going to see a ton of target volume in a very bad offense. I think Christian Kirk will also see a lot of target volume in a very bad offense. I think Jerome Ford will have guaranteed touches in a bad offense. I'd probably go Ford over Wandell. We can go ahead and we can look at what we have with the projections here. Ford, higher, lower, 66.5 total yards, 1.3x scored touchdown. Wandale, higher, lower, 47.5 total yards, 1.8x. Obviously, you're going to get the cheap reception volume for Wandale Robinson, which makes him a little more appealing. But the Browns offense should be better than the Giants offense this week. Can I get, and again, we looked it up. We looked up the updated implied team totals for this Giants offense earlier today, post Malik Neighbors being ruled out. And what we ended up seeing was, I believe the Giants project out to be the third worst offense in the NFL this week. Now, let's answer some of the free questions that we have in the live chat, and then we'll get back to the questions on the site. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'll be happy to answer as many as I can. Okay. Eduardo says, should we be trying to sell Mason? I mean, maybe if you're 4-0. Bamboozzi says likely or Schultz. Oh, dear God. Disgusting. I'm having to stream tight ends this week. Most people in my league only roster one tight end, so I was able to get Frymuth. Most people would probably say Schultz. I'm going to go likely. Schultz has been the more consistent option. But with that being said, you have Tank Dell getting added back in. So I do think you have some of those targets that are going to get stolen by Tank Dell. And in the case of Dalton Schultz, in the case of Isaiah Likely, well, he's been very bad over the past 2 weeks. It's in an environment where you've had absolutely no passing volume whatsoever in Baltimore. Where maybe if all of a sudden the games are a little bit closer, you have some more passing attempts for Lamar Jackson. Tutu says Sutton or Keenan at the flex. I will go Cortland Sutton over Keenan Allen. Both offenses shouldn't have a ton of passing volume. But if we look at Keenan, he is the second or third target in his offense. That should be very spread out. Whereas Sutton, he is the only guy. He had 60 Bo Nix pass attempts last week and 60 receiving yards for Cortland Sutton. But real quick, we just hit 400 likes on the stream. Thank you so much for everybody going down there and hitting that like button. Of course, if you have not done so already, it's not too late. We are live streaming for 5 hours a day, answered as many questions as we can. So if you want to show some support by hitting that like button, I would appreciate it. Matthew, long time no see. Hope you're doing well. So do we go Judy or Downs? I'm going to go Downs, assuming that you have Joe Flacco. If Anthony Richardson is under center, I definitely think you can pivot over and go Judy instead. Ryan says, do we drop Andrews at this point? I believe I have Andrews ranked tight end 16 rest of season. So I have Andrews ranked alongside those waiver wire tight ends. Definitely I wouldn't feel comfortable starting him this week. If you wanted to go through and if you wanted to just hold on to him and see what happens, I have no harm, no foul in doing so. Like the thing is, like, if you're dropping Mark Andrews, who are you picking up? That's the main thing. If you're playing in a 14-team league, there's no way in hell you drop Mark Andrews because I'm pretty confident the options on your waiver wire won't be stronger. However, if you're playing in a 10-teamer, then yeah, if you're in a 10-team league where you also maybe just picked up Tucker Kraft, I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to. Okay. Polar says thoughts on Antonio Gibson. I think Antonio Gibson probably sees the majority of touches. But with that being said, it's in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And I think Ramondre Stevenson will see work as well. So my read on the New England Patriots running backs at the moment, and of course I could be wrong, but this is how I'm viewing it, is I think both Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson need to be on rosters. They both have to be on rosters. Now, with that being said, am I starting either one? No. I wouldn't start either guy. Okay. Dallas says Olave or Deontay this week. Honestly, very close. Up to you. Kiss the Ring says Sermon's going to let a lot of folks down tomorrow. I think we talked about this yesterday. But yeah, so once Jonathan Taylor was officially ruled out, it's actually funny because the person in my league, Corey, who had picked up Trey Sermon, he spent like $30 fab, something like that on Sermon. He had sent a message saying like, hey, I'm going to have to get rid of some of my depth because I need to drop players because I have Kelsey and Mahomes on bye next week, blah, blah, blah. So as soon as Taylor was ruled out, I was like, oh, now we get confirmation. I'd probably start Sermon. I'll send him the $30 he just spent on Sermon if he needs to open up a raw spot. He's going to be on his bench anyway. So I sent him like a DM on Discord saying like, hey man, I'll give you the $30 or whatever for Sermon. And then immediately after the report came out saying that this coaching staff said it was going to be a running back by committee. And then I immediately deleted that message on Discord. And before he saw it, I was like, okay, yeah, we do not need to do that. Okay. Christian says, do we think Chuba Hubbard will sustain this? Start him over HN or Connor? I would start him over those guys these next 2 weeks. Do we think that Chuba Hubbard can sustain it long term? No, not at all. Once Jonathan Brooks is back, Jonathan Brooks will presumably be the running back one. Now, with that being said, is Jonathan Brooks going to be some absolute must-start player? Probably not. I do think at that point, it's probably a running back by committee, but am I excited about Chuba Hubbard if he's seeing 40% of the work in Carolina? No. For any running back to be exciting in this Carolina Panthers offense, even if the offense is better than it was at the beginning of the year, they need to be seeing the majority of the backfields. It can't be enough that they just have a role. They need to have the majority of it. And yeah, that's why I'm willing to say 100% Chuba Hubbard will be involved and he'll have a role here. The thing is to just what extent. I think it's the main thing to figure out. But let's move this over and let's get to our next question. Obviously, if you ever want to get a guaranteed answer, you can always ask it through flogfantasy.com. Over there on flogfantasy.com, you just go to the button in the top right corner that says expert advice. You can ask a team review, trade question, start sit question, whatever you are wanting here. If you did want that team review, I'd highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have with Underdog Fantasy. Or if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you will get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you will also be getting a free Dak Prescott pick, more than less than half a total yard for tomorrow night's game. And you'll get a free team review over there on flockfantasy.com as well. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address. That way I can accredit you with your free team review voucher. But what I actually want to see right now is, do they have any Ayuk rivals? This is what I wanted to look at because I knew people are losing their mind with Brandon Ayuk, with how bad Ayuk has been so far this year. On Underdog, where y'all are screaming at me that you cannot start Brandon Ayuk and Brandon Ayuk's a bomb and blah, 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 blah. Which I don't know why I'm defending Ayuk. It's not like I told you to draft this guy. I ranked him pretty much at ADP. I just think it's crazy that everybody's out on him a month into the season. Right now, you can go Harrison to have more receiving yards than Brandon Ayuk and get an extra 4 yards on the Marvin Harrison side. That's not me telling everybody to run over and go oh, you need to take the Harrison side here. Not that at all. Just that there's a reason that this is set up this way. Brandon Ayuk has a great matchup against Arizona. It's going to be a very high-scoring offense. Start Brandon Ayuk. Start Brandon Ayuk. And obviously, if you thought Ayuk is a bomb, at that point, take Harrison in the 4 receiving yards. But I'm not doing that. I'd be too scared. I think the spot's too good for the Niners offense. Now let's go over to Tricky Dick. This is one of those free team reviews through Underdog Fantasy. So thank you for taking advantage of that, my guy. Going to be excited to check this out. This is St. Brown Laporta Potty. At least this is a little bit of a spin on the Laporta Potty name. At least we got a little bit of an extra thing here. This is a league where you start 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 2 receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flex spots. With 1 tight end, 1 kicker, 1 individual defensive player, half PPR. It's kind of an odd format. Think we need to beef up running back. What are your thoughts? We get offered Brian Robinson for Cooper Kupp. I would rather have Kupp. So a couple of different things here. If it's a league where you only have to start 1 running back and you can start up to 4 receivers, if it was a spot where you had a full PPR format I don't know. If it's a full PPR format, we're pumped. We're building around wide receiver. We're going 0 RB because I want to put wide receivers in both those flex spots. I'll start 4 of them weekly, and we'll just figure out our one running back position that we need. However, since it's half PPR, running backs are a little more appealing for the flex. So overall, it is a very balanced format. I know it seems really weird on the surface, but I don't think there are too many adjustments that we are making, to be honest. The other thing is, with you only starting one individual defensive player, it doesn't matter. You'll always be able to find someone off the waiver wire. You'll always be excited about somebody here. Now, pulling this up, quarterback, we are elite. We have Daniels, we have Kyler. You can see this is a nutso team in the first place. And yeah, there are definitely going to be a lot of moves that we are making with this team right away. So you need to go through and you need to sell one of our quarterbacks. Obviously, wish we would have sold Kyler Murray last week. Hindsight is 2020. Now people are very down on Kyler after the disappointing performance against Washington. But going over and looking at maybe some of these teams that could use a QB. I mean, that team has Jordan Love. This team has Richardson, Cousins, Goff. They probably think they're fine. The second that we have a significant injury to any quarterback in fantasy football, we approach that team and we go, hey, we'll give you Kyler Murray and James Conner. Give me your running back one. I'll give you Kyler and Conner. Give me your RB1. Clearly, we don't need both these studs. Going over to running back, we have Achane for the long-term upside. I may be a little bit less excited about Achane in a half PPR format than we would be in a full PPR league. But at this point, we definitely have missed the boat to sell Achane. We have James Conner, Jonathan Brooks, Zach Moss, Jerome Ford. So we have a ridiculous amount of depth here. If anybody's having an issue with the voucher, please email me, mason.flockfantasy.com. And if you just signed up for Underdog, you're not going to get your voucher until the next day. Underdog sends me a list of email addresses every single morning for the day, the people who signed up the day previous. And then we go through and we hook them up with the free team review voucher. Just wait a day if you just signed up to Underdog with code FLOCK. You should have it in the morning. But looking at what we have here, I think if you don't need to start Jerome Ford, there's no real reason to roster Ford. The value is about to get zapped the second that we have Nick Chubb coming back in. So, I mean, if you could potentially go through, target one of these teams that, like, this team just had Ramondre Stevenson benched. They're either starting like Ezekiel Elliott or Julian McLaughlin at RB2 this week. We need to approach this team and go, hey, I'll give you Jerome Ford and miscellaneous wide receivers, Zay Flowers. I'll give you Jerome Ford and Zay Flowers for Stephon Diggs. I'll give you Jerome Ford and Jamison Williams for Stephon Diggs. I'll give you Jerome Ford and Jayden Daniels for Josh Allen. And make one of those 2-for-1 deals and squeeze out the trade value that we have for the player that's giving you production right now, but the value in the long term may go down. Going over to wide receiver, we have St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Kupp, Reed, Flowers, and Jamison. So we are in a great spot here at wide receiver. Going over to tight end, we have 3 tight ends with tight end one overall upside with Laporta, Kraft, Hawkinson. I mean, if you have all 3 of these tight ends, there's no reason that we need to be rostering Cole Kmet. You cut Cole Kmet and pick up another running back that you think is an injury away from making a big difference. But I mean, as you look at this team, we can acknowledge that this team is freaking nuts. If you were looking to do anything, it's a 2-for-1 deal where we squeeze out the value for the guys that are producing now, but maybe the long-term value is going to be coming down just a bit. Such as Jerome Ford in 2-for-1 deals where you can potentially upgrade elsewhere. Personally, I think that's the main thing that we would be doing. Obviously, trying to squeeze out some value from the second quarterback that we have with this team as well. It's much easier said than done. We're probably going to have to wait for a spike with Kyler. We're going to have to wait for somebody to really feel like they need some help at quarterback. Because obviously right now we are in a spot looking at everybody else in the league. They do seem to be just fine. But yeah, I really do like the team. I think that you are in a great spot overall, and you just have so much value that you for sure can go ahead and you can look to make some 2-for-1 deals and get upgrades in the lineup elsewhere by selling off some of those bench pieces. But I really do appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. But let's move this over and get to our next question. And let's answer some questions in the live chat as I pull this up. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Would be happy to answer them. Okay. Brian Thomas, Wan'Dale Robinson, George Pickens. We got to pick 2. I'm going to go Pickens and Brian Thomas. If the weather gets to be extremely bad in Pittsburgh, then maybe at that point you pivot over. And maybe at that point you decide to go with Wan'Dale over George Pickens. So we'll be monitoring the weather tomorrow. Dallas says trade Neighbors for Bijan. I think it depends on your team. We do have Neighbors ahead of Bijan in our rest of season rankings at the moment. Teresa says McBride or Kraft full PPR. I think you probably end up having to go Kraft unless we get clarity on the McBride situation before Kraft plays. But what time is Tucker Kraft playing? Kickoff may actually be at the same time. Let's look at this. Actually, Kraft plays at the same time. If they both play, we're going to go McBride. Tiger says Downs or Dell in the flex in a full PPR. If you have Joe Flacco as the quarterback, we go Downs. If you have no Flacco, we go Dell. But let's move this over to the questions that we have on the site, and we'll get back to questions chat, obviously going back and forth. But if you ever wanted to get that guaranteed answer over there on flockfantasy.com, you can always do that with a button in the top right corner that says expert advice, get a team review, trade question, start sit question, whatever you're wanting. If you wanted that team review, definitely take advantage of the Underdog promo that we have. Some of the Underdog picks that I kind of want to point out that I think maybe y'all will like is 1, Harrison, dab more receiving yards and Brains and Ayuk, and you get +4 on the Harrison side. Kenneth Walker to go higher than 88.5 total yards. Keon Coleman to go higher than 40.5. But if you wanted to check out any of those picks, you can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the description or in the live chat. Code FLOCK will hook you up with a 50% deposit bonus. Plus, you'll be getting that free Dak Prescott pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tomorrow night, and a free team review over there through flockfantasy.com in the live stream that we are doing every single night. But Jay Marrero, here you have Harrison, Godwin, Bowers, Najee, Cook, Mahomes in our lineup currently. We're looking at the flex spot, and we're choosing between Garrett Wilson, Dontavian Wicks, and Brian Thomas. We literally just went back and forth with this question for someone else, pretty much the exact trio of receivers. I hate to say it. I do think that it's extremely, extremely close, but we are probably going to take Dontavian Wicks. Actually, I'm lying to you. We're going to go Garrett Wilson. Wicks has the great matchup. Wicks has no Watson. Wicks has no Dobbs. Wicks has every reason why you would ever go through and start him. Personally, if it was my team, I would not have the mental willpower to go ahead and bench the wide receiver that's currently 7th in the NFL in targets, even if they have a brutal matchup going up against the Vikings. I would just go ahead. I would just play Garrett Wilson. But like I said, I completely acknowledge that I am mentally weak. The correct play very easily could be Wicks. Okay. Now, let's move this over to a trade question from Heyo Micah says other receivers are St. Brown, Cup, Ayuk, neighbors. Running backs are HN, Walker, Stevenson, ETN. So Brian Robinson and James Cook upgrade, Chase to Drake London downgrade. I would probably prefer the Chase and Brian Robinson side, to be honest. I mean, if we are thinking this, obviously with Kirk Cousins having the 500-yard passing day, it is a spot where London looks just extremely exciting. But going into the future, I don't know if we can expect there to be that much more passing volume in Atlanta in comparison to Cincinnati. Brian Robinson cleared, good to go. It looks like he won't be missing any time in comparison to James Cook. I don't know what the real difference between the two backs are. I think we prefer the best player in Jamar Chase. It's close, though. Now, Stephon coming out with a start set. Here, it's either Josh Downs or Jacoby Myers. If you look at my rankings on the site currently, we have these guys pretty much back-to-back. Y'all are asking me all the very close questions. Going through and looking at this. Operating under the assumption that Flacco is the starting quarterback here for the Colts, I have Josh Downs at 31 and Jacoby Myers at 32. They are damn near back-to-back. You do have a tough matchup for Jacoby Myers going up against Denver. I think the Colts offense will be much better, so we would go Downs, but it is extremely close. Now, if Anthony Richardson plays, you for sure bench Downs. We have Josh Downs and Leggett with our bench at receiver. So the main question is, Downs would be the guy that I would want to get into the lineup. Would I play Josh Downs over Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, or Zach Moss now that you have Joe Flacco under center? I don't think I would. Honestly, I think I would leave this as is. Because you do have the alpha target shares for Amari and Terry. And with Zach Moss, you have the starting running back and what should be one of the best offenses in the league. Now, Callie Jack here trades away Tony Pollard, receives Travis Etienne. I think that this is a very clear upgrade. Well, yes, we cannot sit here and act like the Jacksonville Jaguars have been that much better than the Tennessee Titans so far this season. We can't act like the Jacksonville Jaguars have significantly outplayed their division rival. Projecting going into the future, sportsbooks are still saying that the Jags will be a much better team. Like, let's go ahead and let's see if we can pull this up. Jacksonville Jaguars regular season wins. Right now, you're at pretty much either over under 8.5 or 7.5. Looking at the Tennessee Titans, 5.5, 6.5. Considering the fact that the Jags are 0-4 right now, I think you'll have much brighter days ahead. Etienne's giving you the receiving usage. I'm less worried about Tank Bigsby than I'd be worried about Tajee Spears. Obviously, Etienne's been worse than Tony Pollard in fantasy football through the first 4 weeks. But fantasy football is a little bit more than just recounting who has been worse. We're trying to project out into the future. And in the future, if we get improvement from the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, I think Etienne could improve as well. Now, Peanut87 coming out with a team review. It's one of those free Underdog team reviews. Appreciate you. I'm going to be excited to check this out. This is All You Need Is Love. We are the number one team with the League Analyzer. There are a couple teams up here at the top. The top 4 teams are really all competing for that top spot. Says, what's good, Mason? Been loving the content recently. Keep doing what you're doing. Wondering what you think about the team. I feel like I have too much depth at wide receiver and running back. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, so we're definitely looking to sell depth where we can. And would like some upgrades as I have to bench Godwin every week moving forward, but no one in my league likes to trade. Are there any moves to make? So 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. If nobody in your league likes to trade, and this is why I go through and when we make our sell high videos, we include players that are just absolutely crushing that everybody is extremely excited about. That's why we included Devon Achane 2 weeks ago after the Bills game. We included Chris Godwin last week when he was, I think, a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy through the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whenever it was at that point. And yeah, if you're trading with people who don't want to trade, typically you are needing to go through, you're needing to give them those players that are currently crushing it. And somebody that is currently crushing it and a clear spot where I think we can upgrade in a league where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex is I think maybe in the long term, we can upgrade over Jordan Love. Now, Jordan Love clearly looks great. Jordan Love, I do think, can potentially lead the NFL in passing yards per game. Obviously, it'd be very difficult for him to lead the NFL in passing yards on the season just because he misses some time here. But I think he could lead the NFL in passing yards per game, passing touchdowns per game. And going into the future, maybe he is the QB1 in terms of total passing volume. But specifically with the understanding that we have no rushing upside whatsoever from Jordan Love, I do think that this could be an interesting spot for us to just go ahead and effectively cash in by selling some of these depth players that we have and get a quarterback that does have that insane rushing ceiling, assuming that this is a 4-point passing touchdown league where you're getting 1 point per 25 passing yards, where you are a little bit more incentivized to build around the quarterback that has the elite rushing ceiling. Like, the first thing I would do is I would go to the Lamar team. I'd go to the Jalen Hurts team. I'd go to the Josh Allen team. I'd go to the Jaden Daniels team. Those 4 teams, I would offer them Dontavian Wicks and Jordan Love in a 2-for-1 deal to go get one of their quarterbacks. Because if we look at this team, for instance, Jordan Love and Dontavian Wicks are both so damn exciting. They have been, this past week, they crushed it. They're extremely high in my rankings this week. I think we have Jordan Love ranked as the QB5 this week. And obviously, Dontavian Wicks looks like a must-start guy with the injury to Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. While he's a must-start guy for some people, your team is too good. There's no world in which we ever play Dontavian Wicks over any of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, Deebo Samuel, Chris Godwin. So if we are not playing him right now when the setup is better than it ever could be, I simply don't know when we would ever play him. So if we could go through and pivot from Dontavian Wicks and Jordan Love. And yeah, if anybody's having an issue with flockfantasy.com, please send it in the site issues section of the Discord. You should be able to go to the description of this live stream and click the Discord and send it in the site issues section of the Discord chat. And the email and one of the developers can help you out. But yeah, going through and looking at this, for these teams with elite quarterbacks, this team with Josh Allen presumably will start Dontavian Wicks this week. And maybe they're excited about Dontavian Wicks in the long term too. They have no Neighbors. They have no Smith. I'm imagining that they benched Mooney. If they played Mooney, obviously good for them. They have no Chubb. They have no Singletary. They may say yes if right now we send them Jordan Love and Wicks for Josh Allen. This team with Jalen Hurts, Dontavian Wicks would immediately slide into their flex spot. Let's see if we can send them Jordan Love and Dontavian Wicks for Jalen Hurts. Like, if your league mates don't want to trade, and these players down here won't make a difference in our lineup regardless, might as well go ahead and try to make that 2-for-1 deal to get that improvement where it will impact us. But we have to be thinking through it in the mindset of what can we also do to help out our league mates where it's almost a no-brainer for them. Going over to running back, we have 2 RB1s right now with Kamara, Jordan Mason for the short term. Long term, we have Jonathan Brooks for the upside. We have Rashad White, Alexander Madison as quality depth. And this does actually show me that I need to move up Alexander Madison in our rest of season ranks. So let me do that real quick. But yeah, Alexander Madison, he was already trending to have more and more work here in this offense. Now that you have the Zamir White injury, I think honestly, we probably bump up Madison a ton in our rest of season ranks. I think Alexander Madison at least goes up to RB46. The issue is Alexander Madison's not a good running back. It's not good at offense. But still, really love having Alexander Madison as a free waiver wire pickup. Wide receiver, it's a league where we can only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So yeah, going through and like seeing if we can make that Wicks pivot. Or then honestly, same thing. If you wanted to pivot over to like an elite tight ends, if you wanted to go get McBride, if you wanted to go get Kelsey, in a league where you only have 2 wide receivers and 1 flex for your starting lineup requirements, where we are just absolutely loaded and have the best team in this league by a decent gap looking at the squad, I think you could afford to go out there and you can afford to make that move. So I love the team. I agree with you. I think maybe we have a little bit too much depth. If this was a league where you had multiple flex spots, we're keeping it perfectly as is. But specifically with this team, I think instead we go ahead and we probably look to see if we can squeeze the upside and squeeze the value add that you have with Dontavian Wicks right now. And if we could potentially sell Wicks with Ferguson for the elite tight ends, or Wicks with Love for the elite quarterback, I could see somebody biting on it, and I would really love to do so. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you. I really hope that I was able to help you out in some way with this, my friend. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. But great team. I wish my team had literally half this value on it. Now going over to Bin Dog, this is a massive trade question. I've completed 2 different trades in my league. This is essentially what we got and what we gave up. Okay. So we are just going to find an easier way to look at this. I hate to do this, but I promise you there is no world where Isaiah Likely determines who wins or loses this trade. We're just going to take Isaiah Likely out of it to clean it up a bit. Going through, looking at my rankings rest of season, I have T. Higgins and Brian Thomas, wide receiver 26 and wide receiver 27. There's no world in which they swing the deal one way or another for me. They are back-to-back. They are personal preference. At lunch, I may rather have Thomas. At dinner, I may rather have Higgins. I'm going to go back and forth every day of the week with these guys. So as of now, there's not a massive swing. We can take both them out of the deal. And if we look at it like this, it becomes a lot clearer. Honestly, I have Najee Harris, Travis Etienne back-to-back. I have them RB19 and RB20. If it wasn't for the Jalen Warren injury, it'd be very easy to take Travis Etienne. But with the Jalen Warren and Cordell Patterson injuries, Najee Harris is right there. So with them RB19, RB20, I think it's very easy to say personal preference, up to you. I'm taking them out of the deal. And if you clean up the trade like this, would I rather have Brian Robinson and Jerome Ford or Jonathan Taylor Baker Mayfield? I want the Jonathan Taylor side by a mile. Hopefully we get JT back soon. I think the Taylor side wins this trade. But yeah, if you're ever looking at trades that are this big and involve this many moving pieces, I definitely recommend trying to whittle them down to the meat and potatoes of it. Like Isaiah Likely is like a little garnishing on this trade, right? Like he never makes a difference. Just throw them out and look at what the meat and potatoes are. And I think the meat and potatoes really are Taylor and Baker versus Travis Etienne and Jerome Ford and Brian Robinson. And then the other spots are just personal preferences. Now, Jordan says, Najee at 20 seems high. Have you watched him run? I think Najee Harris is very bad at the game of football. I think if you're going to get 20 touches, it doesn't matter. If you think that Najee Harris is going to be a bum this week, I have news for you. Najee is one of the highest projected running backs on Underdog currently at higher, lower 89.5 total yards, higher, lower 17 rushing attempts. If you're that confident, my friend, you are more than welcome to go take the lower on Najee Harris. Looking at some of the rivals, if you think, oh, Najee Harris is a bum, Rico Dowdle's a crusher, you think Rico Dowdle will have more rushing yards than Najee Harris, and you get 28 added rushing yards on the Rico Dowdle side. So, if you're that confident with it. You know what I actually want to see? Do they have a Keon Coleman rival right now? No, they don't. Okay, so let's move this over to our next question. Hogan coming out with a start set. Here at wide receiver, we have Tyreek and Christian Kirk. Tight end, we have Tucker Kraft. I'm assuming that you want 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and a flex. If you want 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and a flex, my guy, next time, please just go through and leave 2 running back slots empty and put the 3 running backs that you're interested in underneath. And then we could go through and we could fill that out for you. But my 2 running backs, I'm going to want Gibson and Ford. We're going to bench Braylon Allen in a very tough matchup. Quarterback, you're going to go to the waiver wire. There has to be somebody better than Deshaun. And then for the flex spot, we will go with Deebo Samuel. So go Deebo over Mari, bench Braylon Allen, and then for the love of God, see if we can stream quarterback. I do not want to be playing Watson. Now, the Soaring Eagle says QB2 slot is a super flex. I'm worried about the rain in the Colts game for Flacco downs. What are your thoughts? So, and I know this is like dumb for us to say, but whenever anybody ever brings up weather on Saturday or Friday, I always say, let's just wait until right before kickoff. Let's wait till a few hours out. Because I can't tell you how many times, literally just where I live in Austin, Texas, that they tell me it's going to rain tomorrow and it doesn't rain. They tell me it's going to rain or it's not going to rain and it does rain. Like, it is funny, and I think that's like a thing where everybody lives, right? You never trust the weatherman with 100% certainty. But whenever we go through and we try to map out like our fantasy football lineups, we always assume like we know what the weather is going to be in a different part of the country because we read that the weather was going to be bad on Twitter. So definitely something to monitor for sure. There are a couple of games you have to monitor with weather. Here for the running backs, we're going to go James Conner. I'm not super excited about it surrounding the fact that you are dealing with the brutal matchup against the Niners. And I understand that there's a hurricane in the Gulf. And that's why I brought up that we have to be watching the weather in the Pittsburgh game, of course. But I don't want to be making start-sit decisions saying we know exactly what the weather is going to look like. We know what the wind is going to be like. I do want to just wait a little bit before we are making those decisions on Sunday because I think we will have more information. Trust me, my fam just went through a hurricane. I understand that it's a brewing. But in going over to quarterback, like in terms of our play in the super flex instead of Flacco, you'd be playing Keon Coleman or Travis Etienne. I don't think so. I think you just go with the quarterback in the super flex spot. I think we just go ahead and we take Joe Flacco here. Now, let's go over to another one of those free Underdog team reviews. This is Danig49. It says, hey, Mason, my team was looking good until Rashee Rice got injured. Wanted to see what moves we should target to improve and what players on my bench are droppable. Team is pronounced Danny G49. Danny G49. Excited to get this going for you. And honestly, I am extremely surprised to see that we are sitting at the number 1 spot with the league analyzer post Rashee Rice injury. We lose a top 5 wide receiver in a 14-team format, and we somehow manage to keep the number 1 spot in the power rankings. Absolutely insane. I mean, love to see it here. And this is a league where depth for sure matters a lot more than the teams that we usually look at. The majority of times we're looking at teams here and we're going, oh, it's a 10-team league. You start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. Take a wide receiver, package it for a running back upgrade. Take another receiver, package it for a running back upgrade. Just do it over and over and over again. Well, here you can't say that. Here, it's a 14-team format where you start up to 4 receivers weekly. So this is a situation in which wide receiver depth does matter a lot. Depth in general does as well. And the options on the waiver wire in a 14-team league obviously are going to be much worse than what you have in a 12-teamer and a 10-teamer. So it will be a little bit tougher for me to recommend some of these players that we're going to be dropping off the bottom end. But looking at the quarterback position, we have Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, even in a 12-team league, I'm completely fine having him as my QB1. I think he's a top 7 quarterback. That's what he needs to be a high-end QB1 in a 14-team league. So I think you're completely fine with Kyler here. Now, going over to what we have at running back, we're currently sitting with 2 elite RB1s. We have Barkley. We have Kyron. Clearly, both are top 14 RBs. Clearly, both are RB1s. Chase Brown could be a top 28 running back. We possibly have another RB2 here. We have Bucky Irving. We have Gibson. We have plenty of running back depth, and we have the long-term upside of Pacheco and Keaton Mitchell. Going over to wide receiver, Drake London's for sure a top 14 option. DJ Moore is for sure a top 28 option. So we have a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. We have Keon Coleman here as, presumably a top 42 option as well long-term. We have Leggett. We have plenty of wide receiver depth. Jordan Whittington, I think, is fine rostering in a league where you can start 4 receivers in a 12-team format. In a 14-team league, I definitely think he's worth the roster spot. And then looking at what we have at tight end, we're currently sitting with Trey McBride and Tucker Kraft. So, to be honest with you, this is the perfect team. If we are going to be honest with each other, your team in a 14-team league after losing Rashee Rice and Isaiah Pacheco is better than my team in my 12-team league. So, to be completely honest, reasonably speaking, I don't know what I can tell you to do with this team. Depth matters. We've had serious injuries. So maybe at this point, we are lacking a little bit of depth. It's a 3-1 roster. If you really wanted to go through, and if after this week we get Trey McBride back at 100%, Tucker Kraft proves that he's a top 10 tight ends, I'm assuming that we could be able to go through and flip Tucker Kraft in this league. Like going through and looking at the other teams in your league at the tight end position. Right now, this person's running out Eric Hall and Ben Sinnott. If you wanted to send them, potentially say like Tucker Kraft and DJ Moore to see even get up to Tyreek Hill, it would be a no-brainer. Obviously, much easier said than done. If you want to see if we can send them Tucker Kraft and Leggett, Tucker Kraft and Keon Coleman, and get up to Chris Olave, I think that's a no-brainer. This team at tight end is Schultz and Gesicki. If we want to send them Tucker Kraft and Keon Coleman to get to Chris Godwin, absolute no-brainer. But honestly, if we are making that 2-for-1 deal, we kind of need to be charging a little bit of a premium just given the format where the depth does matter a lot more than it would in that 10-team league, where the depth does matter a lot more in that 12-teamer. So that's really the only thing that I could possibly see with this team. Like I said, your team in a 14-team league is better than my team in a 12-teamer. So we are both 3-1 though. And you are what your record is. That's the only thing that matters. But I really do appreciate you. I think that you are in a great spot. Obviously, it sucks to have the Rashee Rice injury, but you're already crushing the rest of these. Like, look, you have over double the value of the team at the bottom in this league. Team at the bottom of this league is Xavier Worthy is their wide receiver 1, Cortland Sutton wide receiver 2, Jerry Jeudy wide receiver 3. Team in the second to last spot is sitting here with Jalen Warren. This week they play Tyler Algier. This week they're playing Alec Pierce in their second flex. You're just crushing the rest of the league here. Now, Goose coming out. DJ Moore, Jonathan Brooks versus Garrett Wilson. It is a 12-team format. Running back, we have Achane, Jordan Mason, Breece Hall. I think looking at your team, you can afford to make this 2-for-1 upgrade. I think that there's more value here with the DJ Moore and Jonathan Brooks side. So I would try to squeeze out a little bit more if we could. Going through and looking at this, if we could get them to add in J.K. Dobbins, I think it would make an absolute no-brainer. And we could toss some Raheem Mostert. I would want to send this counter and just see what they say. Because I understand the thought process. I definitely think you can afford to go up and pay for Garrett Wilson here. Just from what I've seen in the live stream, it does seem that like everybody is off on Wilson. And we should be able to get him at a pretty severe discount. Now, Jonathan coming out with a massive start. It says 1-3, need a must win. Akers is on the waiver wire. So wide receiver, Wandale, Addison, Leggett, Flowers. It is a tough spot looking at my week 5 rankings for what we have here. A wide receiver, I am currently sitting with Jordan Addison, wide receiver 34. Zay Flowers, wide receiver 27. Wandale Robinson, wide receiver 30. I do think I still probably go Zay Flowers. Obviously, Flowers over the past 2 weeks, when the Baltimore Ravens didn't have to throw the ball, has been absolutely god-awful. You look at weeks 1 and 2, there's Zay Flowers, I believe, had 10 and 12 targets. And I think in this game against the Cincinnati Bengals, you potentially have a few more passing attempts going in the direction of Zay Flowers. Going over to what we have at running back, we are currently sitting with Zach Moss, Jonathan Brooks, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler. So I think Zach Moss, we're going to just target that game environment where you have a ton of points scored, and Brian Robinson's been cleared to good to go already. And then going down to the flex spot, if Brian Robinson, like we knew was going to be limited, we knew that he was a game time decision, blah, blah, blah. I think I would make you go with Austin Eckler here. I think you would have to take the running back with potentially a little bit of an expanded role in comparison to what you're used to seeing. But I think it's actually going to be a little bit tougher now. Here, wait 1 sec. I think you probably go Wandale Robinson for the guaranteed target volume in a full PPR format. Actually, this is a half PPR league. This being a half PPR league does make it a lot tougher. But thinking about it as well, like the appeal that you would have with Eckler, and same thing, is based off the receiving usage. So while Wandale definitely goes down with a half PPR league in comparison to what you have with a full PPR format, you can say the same thing with Austin Eckler. So I think we go Wandale Robinson here and really hope we get the running backs back soon. Like having no Brooks, no Chubb, no Mixon does make life a lot tougher. Or if instead, I mean, we could go through and start Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon would be freaking nuts, assuming Chubb is good to go. But I appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out, my guy. But please let me know in the live chat if y'all have any free questions. Would be happy to try to answer as many free questions as we possibly can. But looking at this, somebody says Achane for Mixon. I'd rather Devon Achane over Joe Mixon. I mean, if you are looking at Achane, well, yes, it's frustrating that he is just significantly worse with no Tua, which was obviously the expectation. No Tua, fewer first downs, fewer trips to the red zone, fewer points overall in this offense. At least he's playing. Whereas Joe Mixon, he's not viable in the short term either because he's not playing. You can't start him with 0 points coming from him. So we actually talked about this in the live stream last night. So if you look at, say, players that are playing but not giving you the points because another injury in their offense, such as Jalen Waddle, such as Devon Achane and Tyreek Hill, from what I've seen, and y'all know, I would say by no means am I the best fantasy football player in the world. Just kidding, I am. But if I probably answer more fantasy football questions than anybody else in the world, like I would say that I probably have answer 500 questions a day from the live chat comment section and through the site. I would venture to say I answer more fantasy football questions than any person in this world. Nobody else streaming 5 hours a day answering questions. And from what I've seen is like Tyreek Hill's going to be bad for like 2 more weeks because you have no Tua. And instead of him being the wide receiver 1 overall, he falls down to being a mid to low end wide receiver 2 versus Devontae Adams not playing. Devontae Adams not playing, his value doesn't go down at all. Whereas Tyreek Hill playing, but just giving you worse output, people move him down dramatically. Obviously, you have to move him down. But it's just like a weird phenomenon that we have here. Okay. Now, moving this over, Jeff says Chase Brown or Alexander Madison. I actually do go Alexander Madison now that you have no Zamir White. Going back to where you're looking at with Madison in terms of the drawbacks, the main thing is centered around how bad this Raiders offense is going to be. I mean, a couple of days ago, they were tied in projections with the Miami Dolphins to be the worst offense in the NFL this week. That has actually changed where now they are supposed to be much worse than the Miami Dolphins even. But you should have almost every touch for Madison, including receiving involvement. And then Dell or Whittington, I'm for sure going to go Tank Dell over Jordan Whittington for sure. Doctor says Shaheed or Coleman. You're going to go ahead and take Shaheed over Coleman. Even just looking at the underdog projections that you have, one of my favorite picks is Keon Coleman, higher than 40.5 receiving yards with no Shakir. But if you're looking at Shaheed's higher, lower 48.5 receiving yards, right? So I do think you have to play Shaheed over Coleman. Okay. Teresa says Gibson or Sermon this week. I'm not super excited to play Gibson. Obviously, if we're looking at Gibson being the starting running back, I do think it makes him viable. Like if you were desperate, if you just had gross options at this point, you could definitely look to go with Antonio Gibson. Is it something that like we should be excited for in that he is a running back in a committee in one of the worst offenses in the league? Probably not. Like Ramondre Stevenson will still have a role. I think it just makes both running backs unstartable. Okay. Webrad says, Mason, is Kittle good? Thanks for the stream. I appreciate you. Last I saw, I think George Kittle's good. I can go ahead and pull this up and see if we have George Kittle news. George Kittle. I can't see anything else with Kittle. From what I can tell, it does look like he's going to be playing. It is so annoying that like Twitter, for whatever reason now, like I searched George Kittle trying to find injury updates and I get a video of him deadlifting from 2022. Like I feel like on Twitter, this used to not happen. I feel like I used to search for news and I would get all the relevant news from that time. And you can't go to latest because with latest there, instead, it's just a bunch of people asking George Kittle or so-and-so, George Kittle or so-and-so. Trev DeGoat says, trade Mahomes and Rome for Brian Robinson. We already have Kyler. If you need a running back, I think you do it if you have Kyler. I do think Mahomes still probably a QB1 rest of season, even with the game environment that they find themselves in, wanting to run the ball more often, play good defense, kind of play keep away. And obviously having no Rashee Rice, no Hollywood Brown, all this stuff does hurt Mahomes. Definitely doesn't look like a high-end QB1, more so a low-end QB1 rest of season, even if, honestly, he's been much worse than that. Obviously, if you are looking at Patrick Mahomes, I want to say he's been a mid to low end QB2 so far in the year. I don't think you've had a single game with 20 or more fantasy points for Mahomes this season. But let's move this over and let's answer some more of the questions that we have on the site. Obviously, if you ever wanted to get a guaranteed answer, you always can do so over there on flockfantasy.com. If you go over to flockfantasy.com, hit the button in the top right corner that says expert advice. You can ask a team review, trade question, start sit question, whatever you are wanting. And also, if you wanted that team review, definitely the best way to get it or the cheapest way to get it would be heading over to Underdog Fantasy and using promo code FLOCK. Or if you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy and make it minimum at $10 deposit, you will get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you will get a Dak Prescott free pick, more than less than half a total yard. And you'll get that free team review on the live stream that we're doing every single night. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. But this is one of those free team reviews from Leila here. Really appreciate you. This is all the way through. So this is a 10-team league where right now we are getting crushed, to be honest. Hey, Mason, love your energy in your live streams. We are 4-0. Never mind, we're not getting crushed. Never mind, I apologize. And doing okay in the league analyzer. What kind of trades should we be looking to make right now to do for the future? Are there any positions that we should target? Relatively new to fantasy, so some advice would be helpful. Thank you so much. Going to be really excited to check this out. The reason I figured we are getting crushed is looking at the league analyzer. There are these teams way at the top that just look so damn exciting. Like this team here is Lamar, Gibbs, Jacobs, Najee, Lamb, Nico, Higgins, Bowers, Kittle. This team has HN, Taylor, Montgomery, St. Brown, London, Wilson. Obviously, I guess some of these players have been disappointing because league analyzer, the teams that are at the top are not doing too hot, whereas the teams that are in the middle here are just absolutely crushing the fields. And a quarterback right now, I mean, we are sitting with Jordan Love and Baker Mayfield. Obviously, between these two quarterbacks, we can play the matchups every single week, really without much hesitation either. With it being a 10-team league, if it is only a 4-point passing touchdown format, maybe you prefer a quarterback that has a little more rushing upside. But yeah, it's a 10-team league where you only start 2 receivers in a flex. So, I mean, if you were going to go through and if you were going to be looking at making a move, maybe that's centered around seeing if we can trade away Jordan Love, the hot guy that everybody is extremely excited about for the right reasons. Obviously, he could potentially lead the NFL in total passing yards. He could potentially lead the NFL in passing touchdowns. He looks phenomenal right now, but maybe sending him with the wide receiver to go get an upgrade elsewhere. Now, going over to what we have at running back, we have Kyron Aaron Jones. So presumably 2 running back ones that have the 3-down skill set. We have Braylon Allen, Ramondre Stevenson, Bucky Irving, Austin Eckler. So we have the running back with an elite ceiling in Braylon Allen, where if anything were to occur to Breece, he turns out to be a league winner. Typically in a league that's only a 10-team format where you start 2 wide receivers in a flex, I am going to try to prioritize these guys that we think are an injury away from winning leagues, as opposed to the depth wide receivers like Jordan Whittington that maybe you could play, but you probably don't look to, just because you're never really looking to start those depth receivers. I mean, someone like Juwan Jennings is a good example of this, as like, obviously Juwan Jennings has had some massive weeks here, but realistically speaking, I don't know if we really ever look to go through and play Juwan Jennings in this lineup. Going over to wide receiver, we have Tyreek, Metcalf, Diggs, Jameson, Pittman, Jennings. Tight end, we have David Njoku. So to be honest with you, I'm surprised that this team is 4-0. Specifically in a 10-team league, I guess it's Kyron and Aaron Jones have just been crushing. Baker Mayfield, I just been crushing. I definitely think it's a spot where you can afford to upgrade inside the starting lineup some. Like if you could go through and if we could potentially pivot up and get that upgrade at our wide receiver, or honestly, even for the flex, like in a 2 wide receiver one flex format where you only have 10 teams, I view Jameson Williams as one of those boom bust flex options. It's going to be very difficult to imagine how he turns into a weekly starter as somebody that we just get in the lineup every week, regardless of the matchup. So, I mean, if you wanted to go through and package together Jameson Williams and Stephon Diggs to try to pivot up to a wide receiver that you view in a higher tier, to maybe go get a buy low candidate like Garrett Wilson right now, I think that could be an appealing move. Or go get a wide receiver like Chris Godwin. Honestly, it doesn't even really matter the receiver's name. We're more so looking at the guys in the rankings that are inside the top 12, 13-ish ranks. So you can go over, you can add my ranks. We'll go to wide receiver. But like if you can tier up from, say, Stephon Diggs and Jameson Williams, specifically in this format, and get any of these wide receivers inside the top 12, whether that's Godwin, Debo, Harrison, you already have Tyreek, London, Neighbors, A.J. Brown, Chase. I think that would be an absolute no-brainer for you because one thing that we have with this squad is, I mean, you're so strong here that when we go to make waiver wire moves, there aren't too many players that we could be looking to move on from. Like in a 10-team league, there should be some really solid options on the waiver wire. And I don't know if we are super pumped to cut anybody but Mark Andrews. And even in that case, I don't know if we want to. I'd rather make 2-for-1 deals to open up the roster that way. And obviously, if you could take like Jameson and Love and pivot over to the quarterback with an elite ceiling rushing the ball, such as Josh Allen, such as Jalen Hurts, such as Lamar Jackson, I do think that could be a viable move for you as well. Definitely not something that you have to do, but something that you can consider specifically because of the league format. But honestly, definitely wanting to hold on to Tyreek Hill. Another thing you could do is if you wanted to try to trade Pittman or Jameson and get Jalen Waddle in, or try to trade like Jameson and Braylon Allen and see if we can scoop up like Devon Achane on the super cheap. I think that would be interesting, just knowing that, I don't know, these depth receivers, the name appeal, we want to upgrade elsewhere. We're 4-0. We can think for the long term, and we are destined to make the playoffs at this point. But I really do appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Appreciate you and hope that we were able to help you out. But moving this over to Jay Dollarsign. Says, we need to start 2 receivers in a flex. Thanks for the help. Thank you, my guy. So effectively our flex here is either going to be Tank Dell or Dontavian Wicks. We very easily put Dontavian Wicks over Tank Dell. Maybe if Dobbs was playing, then at this point I could him and haw over this and go, oh, well, we have no Christian Watson, but you have a bunch of receivers still here in Green Bay. It's a deep wide receiver room, blah, 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 blah. But no Romeo Dobbs, no Christian Watson. You will just have a ridiculous target share for Dontavian Wicks in comparison to what we are used to seeing for him. So yeah, to be honest, I think it's just a very easy play over Dell. Now, Cowley Jack coming out with the trade question. Here, this is Tony Pollard, Alvin Kamara versus Travis Etienne, David Montgomery, Marvin Harrison. So Pollard to Montgomery upgrade, Kamara to Etienne, Harrison downgrade. It's a 10-team league, but you do have the ability to start 4 receivers weekly. If we were to make this trade, we probably have to cut somebody, right? I'm assuming. In that instance, we probably cut Jerry Jeudy. Do we need the depth? Wide receiver right now, we have Lamb. We have Higgins. We have Ayuk. We have Rome. Running back, we have Kamara, Pollard, Charbonnet, Ramondre. If this was a 12-team format, I think I could very easily see giving up the best player here to getting the upgrade over Pollard and getting Travis Etienne added on. Based off the injury that you have to Rashee Rice, I understand that maybe we need a little more depth here. I just think that specifically with this being a 10-team league, if I am selling the best player, I do want to be charging a little bit more of a premium than we are. So I probably am just going to go ahead and take Alvin Kamara in this deal. Now let's move this over to JBB928. It's one of those free underdog team reviews. Team name is Jonathan Barkley. Says, want to make some moves to get a better running back, and I'm thinking of benching Tyreek. So it's a league where you start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So maybe, just maybe, if we have a nutso squad, we can bench Tyreek. We are one of the highest teams ranked with the league analyzer. There are about 5 teams here that are all the same. And then there are obviously these teams that take a significant dip down below this. But starting off with our record, we are 3-1. So we can be thinking a little more long-term with the approach that we take with this squad. And starting with what we do with the starting lineup this week. Quarterback, obviously, we are going to have Josh Allen. Nothing to really discuss. Tight end, we have Kincaid. Nothing to discuss. Running back, we're going to be starting Jordan Mason. And we have no Brooks. We have no Chubb. We have no Pollard. So my guy, just in case you didn't know, you need to go through and you need to find a solution to our running back dilemma here. Where we need to pick up another running back. So this is a spot where if we need to drop a receiver to pick up another running back, I understand why we have not done it just yet. Because if we look at these wide receivers, all of these guys at the bottom end of our roster have a ton of value. I don't want to have to drop Dontavian Wicks. I don't want to have to drop Keon Coleman. I don't want to have to drop Jordan Addison. So I completely understand why we've been hesitant to make any moves up until this point. Now, with that being said, I think the trade that we look to make here is very, very simple. It is a 2-for-1 deal where we can tier up, we can consolidate value at wide receiver, where we are sitting with just a ridiculous amount of this wide receiver production on our bench, where if you could potentially move wide receivers or move this production into our starting lineup, we would. Like if you could go through and potentially trade, say, Jordan Addison and Jaden Reed and go get Jamar Chase, 100%. I know some people are going to say, oh, Mason, that's impossible to do. People are very, very excited about Jaden Reed. Like we can go over to the trade finder right now, and I can guarantee you that we'll see some trades that have been made over the past few days of people pivoting off of Jaden Reed and bringing in a true elite level wide receiver. So Jaden Reed, no elite receiver on this end. This trade, you pretty much had Jaden Reed. You got Neighbors return. Jaden Reed, Tyreek Hill straight up. Jaden Reed, Deontay Johnson, Harrison, not enough. Not enough for the Harris. Not enough for JSN. Not enough for just Deontay. Jaden Reed, Debo for Kamara and Montgomery. Jaden Reed, Shaheed for CeeDee Lamb. Like these are the type of moves that I'm going to be sending out to every single owner in our league. We're going to keep it stupid simple, right? I mean, it's a 12-team format. Maybe somebody bites as well. Like we can go through and look at some of these teams with garbage wide receiver rooms. This team right now is starting Kirk, Pittman, and Jacoby. If you could send them, say, the combo of like Jordan Addison and Keon Coleman, give them some viable wide receiver production right now and pick up Puka Nacua where we have the long-term upside, open up a roster spot by selling the wide receiver depth that we are never going to start, and then have the elite wide receiver ceiling down the road when you really don't need to worry about wide receiver production in the short term because we can start Tyreek, Olave, and Jaden Reed anyway. I think I would love to make that move. So, I mean, any chance you get to consolidate wide receivers 2-for-1, we take it. I mean, if we could find maybe one of those teams with garbage wide receivers that needs an additional running back, like if you can go get Bijan Robinson by selling Tony Pollard and Dontavian Wicks to get Bijan, let's do it. This team has, I mean, Justin Jefferson, Diggs, McLaurin, they're fine at receiver. This team is Amari wide receiver 3. They are fine. This team is Roma Dunze, JSN as their wide receivers 2 and 3. I mean, another good example, I mean, maybe for Mike Evans, we go through and trade Dontavian Wicks and Keon Coleman. We bring in Mike Evans. We get another roster spot where we can pick up another running back off the waiver wire and really try to focus in on some of the upside that we have with RB at the bottom end of the bench. Because the problem that I have with the team with how it currently stands is we are just optimizing for wide receiver upside on the bench when we already have so much wide receiver upside at the very top of the lineup and a bunch of wide receiver security at the top of the lineup as well. So I'm probably not looking to do much here outside of going through consolidating wide receivers in a 2-for-1 deal, opening up a roster spot, picking up another running back off the waiver wire, or with any of these bottom 3 wide receivers, moving them with Tony Pollard to go get that elite running back or just a running back upgrade. If we were going Jaden Reed and Pollard, we'd need the elite RB. Or yeah, like I said, you could even go like, instead if you want to try to trade Addison and Keon together, we can go Addison and Reed if that can get us Jefferson, if they can get us Chase, if that can get us to that elite wide receiver tier, as we saw is happening in some of the other leagues at the moment. But I really do appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way. And as always, if there's anything I can do, don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. But let's move this over for Jay Gerg. This is Adams, Brooks, Ayuk for Tyreek. Give me Tyreek. This is actually, it's a little bit of a deeper league. Maybe we have to consider this. Who do we have currently at wide receiver? If we get Tyreek Hill, we are starting Tyreek, Nico Collins, Justin. Okay, we have Nico Collins, Justin Jefferson already at wide receiver. Running back's a little bit thin, but we're going to be able to go to the waiver wire and pick up 2 extra options. So yeah, we will take Tyreek. I mean, if you wanted to see if we could just get a little bit of a depth piece, we can ask for Kareem Hunt on top of it, just so we have a little more security at running back. Now going over to a start-sit question that we have from Clever. We have Metcalf and an open wide receiver slot between Adams, Tolbert, Tyreek, Whittington, Watson, Jawan Jennings. I will go ahead. I will take Tyreek Hill, even if expectations with Tyreek in this Miami offense obviously are significantly lower than usual. Running back, no Clyde Edwards-Helaire does make Kareem Hunt definitely a lot more appealing. We're going to go with Hunt and Sermon. I would rather have these 2 starting running backs rather than Gibson, even if Gibson is viewed as a starting running back in New England right now, primarily based around the idea that the Chiefs and Colts are much better offenses than what you have with New England. And then going over to the flex, you have no Adams, you have no Pollard this week, you have no Christian Watson this week. It's really Jawan Jennings, Antonio Gibson, or Jordan Whittington, or Jalen Tolbert with no Brandon Cooks. Here we probably go Antonio Gibson. I'd be very interested to know if Underdog actually has a pick'em for Gibson right now with their projections. Not Bibson. We're looking for Gibson here. Gibson currently is, they really don't have. I mean, they have the receiving yardage marks, but they have not put out the rushing yardage. It's between Gibson and Tolbert. I definitely think you could look at Tolbert now if you really wanted to with no Brandon Cooks here. But let's move this over to Hellboy Jordan, always out. Starts at questions. Has also got offered Adams or Wilson for Evans or Reed. I would not trade Reed. If you wanted to go Evans for Wilson, I think you could. Definitely not something you have to. It's just a personal preference. I mean, Garrett Wilson is currently 7th in the NFL in targets. Something you could do is wait to just do it next week. I don't think Wilson's going to have a big week against the Vikings. And there is that outside chance that you may end up getting a trade here where all of a sudden Adams goes and crushes the value of Wilson. If we can just dodge the bullet of that, no harm, no foul in doing so. Going over to quarterback, we are going to take Stroud over Fields. Looks like there may be bad weather for the Pittsburgh game. Obviously, we're going to monitor that tomorrow. And then for our flex, we're going to go ahead. We're going to take DeAndre Swift and what should be a really good game environment and a really good matchup going up against the Carolina Panthers for Swift to probably have a decent amount of rushing attempts where the Bears are favored in this contest. Now, Hellboy Jordan coming out with a trade question. This is Aaron Jones and Olave versus Zay Flowers and Kenneth Walker. I'd rather have Kenneth Walker over Aaron Jones. I'd rather have Olave over Zay Flowers. I think it's very much up to you. Honestly, don't even care who we have on the roster just because, I mean, it's still just a running back receiver for running back receiver. Can y'all please spam the chat? Would you rather have Zay Flowers and Kenneth Walker? Or would you rather have Aaron Jones and Chris Olave? What side of this deal are you taking? Please let me know in the live chat because I just simply... I think this is it's a personal preference thing for me. But obviously, I could be off here. We got Walker, Jones, Walker, Jones. Jones, Walker, Jones. So it does look like the majority of people are on the Aaron Jones and Chris Olave side. So if it's a personal preference for me, and the majority of people are Chris Olave or Jones, I think you just go with the wisdom of the crowds. I think you just keep your side. Now, Fletch coming out with a trade question. Here we're giving up the best player with CeeDee Lamb, but we are getting back a top 3 running back with Kamara, another top 5 receiver with Nico Collins. So very rarely do I ever want to be giving up the best player. But with that being said, I think you can give up one of those round 1 options if we are getting 2 round 1 options in return. Let me see if we have this team linked. We do have this team linked. Currently, our other quarterback on the team is we don't have one. It would just be Brock Purdy. See, I think you go ahead and you take the Kamara and Nico side. Where, I mean, obviously, Nico looks very similar to CeeDee Lamb at the moment. Now, Hellboy Jordy coming out with another trade question. Says, I'm first in the standings, non-head-to-head, just total points league. Is it worth the risk to still have playoffs? Okay, very good to know in that. So Breece Hall to the combo of the Niners running backs. I would probably rank Jordan Mason over Breece Hall with no CMC. If CMC does come back, I'd probably rank CMC over Breece Hall. So to be honest with you, I'd probably rather have the combo of the Niners running backs over Breece. Going over to what we have with Kincaid and Zach Moss. I think Kincaid's more valuable than J.K. Dobbins. I think Zach Moss is more valuable than Tajay Spears. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to take the Niners backs. I'm going to take Moss. I'm going to take Kincaid. I definitely think that Breece is the best player in this deal. But like I said, I think it's a very unique environment if we have the combo of CMC and Jordan Mason, where we can reasonably expect similar production to Breece Hall for really the entire season. But we are going to get to this team review and then one more trade question. Then we'll get to the free questions in the live chat. But C. Travis coming out with that free Underdog team review says, first time playing fantasy in like 10 years. We run full PPR with double flex and 1 super flex. Need some general thoughts on the league. Do we need to make some trades? Who to start? Thanks again for all this. As a newer player, your video is very helpful. Thanks. So thank you so much. Going to be excited to check it out. And I will say with the league analyzer, they're not pulling in that this is a super flex league in terms of the values. So to be honest with you, looking at where we are here, it doesn't really matter at all if we have a strong quarterback room. If we don't have a strong QB room, I'll be very upset. And yeah, right now our quarterback room is questionable, where we have Anthony Richardson, Fields, and Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, we have the rushing upside with Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields. I think presumably we have 2 high-end quarterback 2s in fantasy football based off the matchups that they are in. Obviously, it's a very tough spot if you are considering the fact that, I don't know. I mean, you don't know when we are going to get Anthony Richardson back in. So with that in mind, we're having to play Rodgers in what presumably is the worst matchup you could possibly ask for in Minnesota. And this is a 10-team league, right? So the expectations have to be higher here as well. So in a 12-team format, I think having Aaron Rodgers as your QB3 is completely fine. Like, I think Aaron Rodgers is a top 36. I mean, as your QB2, I think he is a top 24 QB. But to have Rodgers here as QB3 specifically in a 10-team league, I think that is much tougher. Going over to running back, we have a high-end RB1 with Breece. We have Montgomery. We have Brian Robinson. We have Braylon Allen. We have Trey Sermon. We have a great running back room. Really no hesitation at all with this RB room. Wide receiver, I'm excited to have Neighbors wide receiver 1. Ayuk in a 10-team league, I'd prefer wide receiver 3. Waddle's tough here, wide receiver 3 in a 10-team league. JSN, Mooney, Jawan Jennings find depth. We have Dallas Goedert, Tucker Kraft. So in terms of what we submit with the starting lineup, under the assumption that by the time we have to start Rodgers, Anthony Richardson has not been ruled that he's good to play. You start Justin Fields and Aaron Rodgers this week, quarterback and Superflex. Running back, we go Breece Hall, Brian Robinson. Wide receiver, we go Ayuk and JSN. I really hope we play Darnell Mooney in one of the flex spots. If we didn't, we sadly probably play Jalen Waddle over Braylon Allen. We go Trey Sermon in one of the flex spots and probably Jalen Waddle in the other. And then at tight end, I think we're in a great spot with Bo Tucker Kraft and Dallas Goedert. I don't know if this is going to be possible. It's definitely dependent on the league that you're in, because the league that I'm in, I know that they would laugh at us if we tried making this deal. But I mean, if you could potentially go ahead and look to move, say, Dallas Goedert and one of the quarterbacks to get a QB upgrade, I think that would be a no-brainer. If you could look to move maybe, it's a double flex league. I think we actually need Darnell Mooney here, so. I don't think we do anything. I think it's a spot you just send up a prayer that we get Anthony Richardson back very soon. It sucks. I would love to upgrade quarterback, especially in a 10-team Superflex league. I think that we are behind the 8 ball here at QB. But I don't know if we have a ton of players that people will be excited to go through and acquire outside of maybe Dallas Goedert. And I don't know how excited people would be about Goddard anyway. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you. I really hope that I was able to help you out in some way. And yeah, thank you for being a member of the flock. But let's move this over to Dan the Man. This is Jayden Reed, Brian Thomas versus Mike Evans, Xavier Worthy. Jayden Reed, Mike Evans, personal preference. I'd rather have Brian Thomas over Xavier Worthy. So I think you go with the Reed and Thomas side. And to be honest, if I ask the live chat, I think the vast majority of them would as well. But let me move over to the live chat now and let's answer as many questions as we can get through. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Taylor says Keenan Allen or Josh Downs. Assuming that we have Joe Flacco under center here, I am going to be going Josh Downs over Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is either the wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. We don't know yet. In what is a low volume passing offense. So I don't know. Somebody says Trey Sermon or Tracy. I think that Sermon's going to be in the better offense. So assuming that Flacco's good to go and not AR, I'm going to go Sermon. If Anthony Richardson is the quarterback, I'm a little bit more concerned, because if Anthony Richardson is the QB, then in that instance, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I think you're going to get touchdowns vultured. Not only are you going to get touchdowns vultured, but you're going to have a lower check down rate. Sam says trade Amari for Higgins and Brooks. Yeah, I think Amari and Higgins are about the same rest of season. So I'd view this trade as like you're pivoting from a low-end wide receiver 2 to a low-end wide receiver 2, and you're picking up Jonathan Brooks for free. I think it's a no-brainer. K-Tun says James Conner for Jayden Reed. I would rather start Jayden Reed this week. Rest of season, I do think it's going to be very dependent on your specific team. As obviously rest of season, we should expect that you get Christian Watson back in. You get Romeo Doubs back in as well. Okay. The Wave says Leggett or Whittington. Leggett had double-digit targets last week. Leggett's the round 1 NFL caliber player. Yeah, the touchdown. The offense projects out to be much better than obviously it was with Bryce Young, if you are looking at sportsbooks at the moment. So I go Leggett. I mean, we can check what Underdog has it as, because honestly, the Rams supposed to be a pretty good offense this week if you look at sportsbooks. I don't know what Underdog Fantasy will have, though. Leggett's 1G. Leggett's higher, lower, 45.5 receiving yards. Whittington is higher, lower, 47.5. Very interesting. Higher, lower, 4.97 fantasy points to, 4.25 points for Whittington. Where Leggett is higher, lower, 8.45 points. So maybe Underdog has Whittington as the guy that you would go with. Full transparency, I have Leggett in a ton of Underdog drafts, so I'm a little bit biased. Even though I want to root for our Texas Longhorns, Hook'em Horns. I don't know. Leggett's the round one player. No Adam Thielen. Safe roll. We know what it's going to look like. I'm fine going with him. Chaz says Leggett or Wandale this week. With no Malik Neighbors, you 100% have to go Wandale over Leggett. That's for sure. Okay. Cam says Stevenson or Gibson or Dowdle. I would probably go Rico Dowdle. I'm not excited to start either of the New England Patriots running backs, because if you're looking at the New England backs, those are two guys that will be in a committee in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Generally, as a rule of thumb, I don't want committee backs in very bad offenses. But let's move this over to the questions that we have on the site again. And then, of course, we'll get back to the questions in the live chat. And again, if you ever wanted to get a guaranteed answer to any of your questions, you go over to flockfantasy.com, hit the button in the top right corner that says expert advice. You can ask a team review, trade question, start sit question, whatever you are wanting between the three. If you wanted the team review, definitely what I'd recommend doing is heading over to Underdog Fantasy. And then over there on Underdog, you can use promo code FLOCK and get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. You can get our free Dak Prescott pick, more than less than half a total yard for this week. And on top of that, you'll get a free team review in the live stream that we are doing every single night. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your Underdog Fantasy account. That way I know who we need to hook up with that free team review voucher. But you can find that link in the live chat, and you can find that link in the description. But we already answered this one. Like I said, we want Reed and Thomas here. But let's back out of this bad boy and let's go over to what we have with our new questions. Okay. Next one's going to be from Slush Monkey. Says, I like my team, confident in streaming these quarterbacks. Wide receivers are great. Only thorn in my side is Ramondre. I'm even debating on starting Braylon Allen with Breece Hall. My plan is to survive the weeks and hope Brooks saves me. But if I were to trade for a running back, who should we keep between London and Harrison? So I do have Drake London, I believe, ranked ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. rest of season. We can go ahead and pull this up on the site. But to be honest with you, I think that they are very close. And with that being said, if you were going to look to keep somebody, I have London wide receiver 8 in our rest of season ranks. We have Harrison wide receiver 10. So I don't know, but I would assume that you could get significantly more value for London. But if London is the guy that you sell there, obviously you need to be getting much more value. But anyway, right now, this big sleep team, we are currently second in the league analyzer, and there's a pretty big gap between the teams at the top and the teams at the bottom, right? Here we presumably have double the value of these bottom two teams. But moving this over to the squad, like you said, we are streaming quarterback right now, and a very strong streaming options. We have Baker Mayfield, who's looked phenomenal, and we have Justin Fields, who looked really good this past week, but obviously with Justin Fields as well. One of the things that is exciting, and the main thing that's exciting, is just the rushing upside that you're getting. So even if he looks a little bit worse going into the future, you could still be in a spot that he gives you the 50 rushing yards per game, and he's still viable in fantasy football. So I actually completely fine streaming quarterback here. It is a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, so quarterback is going to make up a slightly higher percentage of our starting lineup output weekly. Going over to what we have at running back, we're currently sitting with Breece Hall, Jonathan Brooks, Braylon Allen, Ramondre Stevenson. So obviously, Ramondre has been horrendous. So bad, he's getting benched. And it is a sad, sad world if we are having to go through and start Ramondre Stevenson. With that being said, even with Ramondre not being the starting running back here, and instead Antonio Gibson is that starter, to be honest, I would actually expect that you probably have more touches for Ramondre Stevenson this week than you have touches for Braylon Allen. And with that being said, at the same time, While obviously most weeks the New England Patriots offense will be significantly worse than what you have with the Jets offense, this is a very unique situation where the Jets have to play the Vikings. So rest of season, you can see right here my rankings. Rest of season, I have Braylon Allen ranked ahead of Ramondre Stevenson. I just think that Braylon Allen has so much more upside. Like if anything happens to Breece Hall, Braylon Allen's a top 10 back. But in terms of submitting our starting lineup this week, like we can go ahead and pull up my rankings. I have Ramondre at RB31. I have Braylon Allen at RB33. I have them pretty much right next to each other. Can y'all spam the chat? Would y'all rather start Braylon Allen or would you rather start Ramondre Stevenson? Are you going to go Braylon Allen or Ramondre Stevenson? Please let me know in the live chat. We got 1 vote Braylon, 1 vote Ramondre. Allen, Ramondre. Allen, Ramondre, Allen. So it does look like most people are saying saying Allen. I would go Ramondre just because, like I said, I think that the gap between these two offenses is lesser this week than it'll be most. And even if Gibson's the starting running back here, I would still expect Breece Hall to take a higher percentage of his own backfield than Antonio Gibson to take in New England. But anyway, running back 2, the main thing that we have to hope for is we have to hope that we get Jonathan Brooks back, right? Going over to wide receiver, we have Nico Collins, Drake London, Harrison Smith, Leggett. So we have 4 locked and loaded wide receivers that we can be extremely excited about going into the future. It's a league where you're going to start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, so the wide receiver depth doesn't matter much. But honestly, those top 4 guys, I really want to be holding on to them. I want to build our team around London. I want to build our team around Harrison. These are players that we can start every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. I think that last roster spot that you have down here at the bottom with Leggett is you could go ahead and you could potentially look to move off of Xavier Leggett and package him with the running back and get an RB upgrade if ever possible. It's just probably not possible to make that move right now. You'd probably need another strong performance or 2 from him. So I think we're leaving this team as is, going over to tight ends. Conklin's an awkward tight end to have because if you're looking at Conklin's time, he's playing at the very beginning of the day, whereas with Trey McBride, you may not get that clarity early enough. So I'd rather drop Tyler Conklin, pick up Colby Parkinson. That way we can hold off some hope for Trey McBride later in the day. But in terms of trades, I'm very sorry. And also in terms of other waiver wire moves other than the swap at tight end, I don't really have much for you. I think you have a great team. We got to just get Jonathan Brooks back in. But obviously we drafted a couple high-end rookies. We drafted Brooks. We drafted Harrison. And we're 2-2, so we're staying alive. Once we get these guys continuing to improve as the season goes on, I think the team's just going to get even better. So I really do appreciate you. And yeah, thank you so much for always hanging out with us in these live streams. And I hope I was able to help you out, my guy. But let's move this over to Big Route. Says, I am 3-1 and up by 25. Should I start Eckler or Madison? My other running back was Bucky. I'm going to go Alexander Madison now that Brian Robinson's been ruled out this early on. I previously was thinking that you were going to have potentially no Brian Robinson. In that instance, obviously, Austin Eckler just absolutely crushes. But here you have to go Madison. And also, my guy, next time you are submitting this, go ahead and just leave 1 running back slot empty and then put the 2 running backs that you'd be considering down here as you're considering options. And then I can go through and I can choose between the 2 of them for you. Now, Jay coming out. This is Ferguson or McBride. So obviously you have Ferguson playing tomorrow night. So we should get that clarity. If McBride's good to go, you'd assume that maybe with the rib, he is a little bit limited. If the weather looks like it's going to be okay in the Pittsburgh game, I think you can go ahead and take Jake Ferguson. If the weather looks like it's going to get gross, I think you go ahead and you take Trey McBride. But it is nice that Ferguson obviously plays after McBride, so we'll get that clarity. I'm going over to Reed. Says, thanks for all you do, Mason. Tua, Kraft on waivers, but who to drop to do that? Wicks over Najee, right? No. I know people are going to hate me saying this, but Najee Harris, I mean, and you could see this with the Underdog pick'em right now as well. If you go over and look at Underdog, based on primarily the unavailability of Cordell Patterson and Jalen Warren. God dang, I can't type. Najee Harris right now is higher, lower, 89.5 total yards, and even odds to score a touchdown. So, like, you can make an argument, oh, this is great, this is bad. I don't care what argument you want, what side on Underdog you are taking. All I know is this tells me I need to start Najee Harris this week. Banged up defensive line for the Dallas Cowboys. No other competition in this backfield. And an offense that looks like they may go through and may lean on the run heavily. I think you have to get Najee Harris in your starting lineup. Like, obviously, Dontavian Wicks looks very exciting as well. But you go ahead and look at the projections with Wicks. It's not even odds to score a touchdown. You get the 1.24x multiplier. It's not higher, lower, 89.5 total yards. It's higher, lower, 56.5 total yards. I think Najee Harris is just such a safe play with the volume that you have. But let's move this over to Lucas with the start sit question. Here, wide receiver, it's between Godwin and Nico Collins. Obviously, super pumped to just go ahead and play both receivers. Really, no reason to get Higgins or DJ Moore in. Going over to running back, we are going to play Achane over Kareem Hunt. Even with Raheem Mostert good to go. I mean, it is a full PBR format, so we'll get the cheap reception volume. And then looking at what we have down here in the flex spots, I think you could make an argument to go T. Higgins over Dontavian Wicks. But if you were wanting Wicks, they're in the same tier for me, post Romeo Doubs inactive news. So you can definitely make you can definitely make the argument for Higgins over Wicks or Thomas, but it is just up to you on this front with the receivers. Now, Lev coming out with a start set. Here at wide receiver, we're starting London and DJ Moore. I personally would start Tyreek over DJ Moore, but that's just me. Tight end, you did not fill anybody in there. Quarterback, we did not fill anybody in there. Really, you're just asking that we need some flex help. Between Tyreek Hill and Dontavian Wicks, obviously it is crazy that it has come to this. If you would have told me, hey, Mason, just let you know, Tyreek Hill's fully healthy, but in week 6, you're going to be considering to start Dontavian Wicks over him, or week 5, whatever we're in. It's all blur at this point. I would have told you there was a 0% chance that was happening. But for me, I am not mentally strong enough to play Dontavian Wicks over Tyreek Hill. Dontavian Wicks sets up to absolutely crush with no Dobbs, with no Watson. The target share is going to be incredibly high in Green Bay. He'll play a career-high amount of snaps. I would say he's maybe going to see a career-high amount of targets, but hell, he saw 13 targets last week. Absolutely crushed. I mean, the weeks that you had from Dontavian Wicks last week, he outscored every week that Tyreek Hill has given you since week 1 combined. So if you wanted to go with Dontavian Wicks, I'm not going to fault you for it whatsoever. I think, honestly, the smart play very easily could be Dontavian Wicks, but I am just not smart enough to make that move. I'm going to go ahead. I will take Tyreek Hill, and I will deal with the consequences. Now, Angel coming out with a start set question. Here, wide receiver, I think we're going to go ahead and we are going to take on a bunch of hate. We're going to take Harrison in a tough matchup against the Niners. And then for the flex, then we're not taking hate for Harrison. We're going to take hate for the flex, I know. On running back, we go Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall. You have no Taylor. You have no Brooks. Tight end Bowers, obviously must start name. Going over to quarterback, if we didn't start Baker, we're going Darnold, but really I have no say in it at this point. And then for the flex, this is where we're taking on the hate. You have no Devonta Smith. You have no Jonathan Taylor. You have no Jonathan Brooks. We are choosing between Jalen Waddle, Wan'Dale Robinson, Brandon Ayuk, and Jalen Watt. Brandon Ayuk has not had a single game of over 10 fantasy points. But Brandon Ayuk is in an offense that projects to score the most points in the NFL this week. And at the same time, he has seen the consistent target volume, where so far this year he's had 25 targets in the first 4 weeks. Going over and looking at the projections, right now, like Dontavian Wicks is higher, lower, 56.5 receiving yards. Ayuk is higher, lower, 60.5. Like, Ayuk has sucked, but you still got to play him. Like, right now, like, you could literally on Underdog take Harrison to have more receiving yards than Brandon Ayuk and get 4 yards added on the Harrison side. But I think you have to play him. You have to trust a good offense. You have to trust a good matchup. You have to trust the large sample that we have from 2023 as well. So it sucks, but you play Ayuk. Now, win coming out, we need to look at either Amari or George Pickens for this week. You're saying Njoku's playing. Yeah, I think David Njoku playing actually does take a few targets away from Amari Cooper. And then also Brock Bowers didn't play well in week 4. I understand Bowers didn't play well in week 4, but you have no Devontae Adams here yet again. So base expectation is that you have just targets being funneled through Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. Obviously, the receivers here are going to line up against Surtain, so it should be a tough spot for them. I had Bowers and Ferguson in the same tier of my rankings when we made them previously. If you wanted to go Ferguson, I'm not going to fault you at all, though, because also you have no Brandon Cooks in Dallas. What I would probably do is, honestly, when we have to make this call tomorrow, when we're closer and we'll have a better idea of what the weather's going to look like in Pittsburgh, we probably go ahead and check in to see if it's going to be a disaster for this Cowboys game and we're going to have a ton of rushing and not much passing volume. And then going over to wide receiver, I'd almost say the same thing with Amari and Pickens. If you go over to my rankings this week, we have these guys literally right here, wide receiver 23, wide receiver 24. But if you check in tomorrow morning and it looks like the weather is going to be really bad, then, I mean, you could make that pivot. Really, it is just up to you. Like I said, I have them 23, 24. Looking at the Underdog projections, Amari, you have higher, lower, 56.5 receiving yards. George Pickens, you have higher, lower, 54.5 receiving yards. Amari, they have less likely to score the touchdown. So it is just kind of up to you. I have Pickens 1 slot higher in my rankings. Now, moving this over, we're answering a trade question. We'll get to more of the free questions that we have in the live chat. Actually, let's get through the team review that we have. Elam coming out with a trade. Here, we are sending Terry McLaurin to upgrade to Deontay Johnson. We're sending Garrett Wilson to upgrade to Nico Collins. And we're paying James Conner and Zach Moss to get it done. This looks like, I don't know if the league settings were correctly filled out, but if it's a 10-team league, it's an absolute no-brainer. And honestly, regardless, just give me the best player in the deal. Give me Nico Collins. Like Deontay Johnson, you can make an argument you'd rather have him over Garrett Wilson at this specific second. I do have Wilson higher in my rankings, but still, it's not that far off. And Nico Collins is really just in a completely different tier than every other option here. Now, Swift Smith coming out with the start set says, trying to decide between Jordan Addison and Wan'Dale Robinson. Appreciate the help. Appreciate you. Going to be excited to check this out. And I think that if you had Malik Neighbors going to go, the answer would very easily be Jordan Addison. Obviously, TJ Hawkinson is out, so we'd assume that Addison still is going to have a considerable amount of targets, even with Justin Jefferson being the dominant alpha in this offense. But with no Malik Neighbors, I do think that you just kind of have to go through. You have to play Wan'Dale. Looking at the other options, you have Leggett, you have Judy, you have Charbonnet. Obviously, no Mixon, no Pollard this week, no CMC. So, yeah, I'm going to go Wan'Dale Robinson. Looking at my rankings with where we have him this week, I have Wan'Dale Robinson at 30. I have Jordan Addison at 34. Clearly, it would be very different with Neighbors in this offense, though. Okay. Now, Ghost coming out with the start says, hey, Mason, hope all's well, sir. So we have a question. Would you drop Roschon for Trey Tucker rest of season? If you needed to play Trey Tucker today, if you needed to play Trey Tucker this week, I would rather have Trey Tucker in my lineup than Roschon Johnson. So I could consider dropping Roschon for Tucker. However, with that being said, is the ultimate ceiling here higher for Trey Tucker, or is the ultimate ceiling higher for Roschon Johnson? The ultimate ceiling's higher with Roschon. If you were to get an injury to DeAndre Swift, knowing that Roschon has 3-down size, knowing that he can catch the ball, I wouldn't do this because I'm not starting Trey Tucker over these names. We have no Gibbs this week. Mooney already played. We have no Puka. We have no Jameson. We have no Dobbins. So I think you go Shaheed, but yeah, I would start Shaheed over Trey Tucker anyway. I mean, Trey Tucker is a wide receiver in the worst offense in the NFL that should be playing behind both the combo of Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers in terms of the targets that they'll see going into the future. Now, obviously, over the past 2 weeks, Trey Tucker has absolutely dominated Brock Bowers in terms of both fantasy points and target share. But expect that to be the case going into the future. It's probably a little bit tougher. But let's move this over to Lucky Monkey. This is one of those free Underdog team reviews. Says, hey, Mason, need help, please. Let me know what we need to do. Okay, so this is currently a team that's in the middle of the league analyzer at 7. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, so the depth's not going to matter a ton. And yeah, let's go ahead and let's pull this up. So we have Darnold at quarterback. So we are streaming quarterbacks weekly. Completely fine with it. Obviously, this game may be a little bit of a tough spot for Darnold. But I mean, Darnold is leading the NFL in passing touchdowns. Plus, his weapons may improve as you get Jordan Addison fully healthy, as you get TJ Hawkinson back into this offense. Now, of course, just natural regression. We would expect it hits. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Sam Darnold's going to get better going into the future, where he's going to go from leading the NFL in passing touchdowns to expanding that lead. No, he's probably not going to be leading the league in touchdowns when it's all said and done. But regardless, definitely a fine streaming quarterback. But I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to drop Darnold and pick up somebody else. If Darnold falls flat this week and you really like a different quarterback off the waiver wire, like if Fields is somehow still out there. Now, going over to what we have with our running back room. We're currently sitting with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor. So we have 2 top 10 running backs in the long term, right? Obviously, the injury with Taylor is going to make life a little bit difficult right now. And this is a team that's 0-4, so we really need to be prioritizing points in this lineup today rather than long-term upside. So to be honest with you, a move that I would look to make personally is if you could go through and potentially sell, say, Jonathan Taylor in a 2-for-1 deal to pivot over and go get a different stud running back that's going to be able to help us right now. Where if you can take maybe like Jonathan Taylor and Nick Chubb, both running backs that have long-term upside but aren't going to be giving us anything this week, potentially nothing next week. And if we can go ahead and look to make that 2-for-1 deal to potentially upgrade to that running back like Breece Hall, to upgrade to that running back like Alvin Kamara, to upgrade to that running back like Barkley. Much you're not going to be able to get Barkley. But anyway, I think that would be a great move to try to backload some of that long-term value into short-term production, specifically in our roster that is 0-4. Now, going over to receiver, we have Debo, Terry, Dell, Shaheed, Wandale. So we have plenty of depth. I mean, I don't want to act like this is the best wide receiver room in the league, right? Tight end, we have Ferguson and Likely. To be honest with you, because of where this team stands currently at quarterback, and I do feel very comfortable starting Jake Ferguson regardless of the matchup, I probably would cut Isaiah Likely and pick up a quarterback off the waiver wire and just play the matchups between Sam Darnold and if you pick up Geno Smith, if you pick up Justin Fields, really anybody like that, you can kind of go back and forth with. But yeah, definitely need to find a way that we can go ahead and sell some of the long-term upside that we have with Taylor and Chubb. It sucks to do it. Obviously, I wouldn't want to do it on a 4-0 team. I wouldn't want to do it on a 3-1 team. I wouldn't even want to do it on a 2-2 team. But specifically on a roster that's 0-4, I think it would make sense to maybe cash in on that long-term running back value and instead get some short-term running back production in. But I really do appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way with this. And yeah, thank you so much again for taking advantage of the Underdog promo that we have. It really does support the channel. But let's move this over and let's answer some of the questions that we have in the live chat for free. So if you have any questions, please drop in the chat. And also, we are hitting 700 likes in the live stream pretty much right this second. So if you have not done so, hit that like button. Would appreciate it a ton. But let's check this out. Follower of Christ says, pick 2 full PPR, Dell, Keon, and Flowers. I'd probably go Keon and Flowers. I would have gone Dell over Keon if it wasn't for the fact that you have no Khalil Shakir in this Bills offense. So with no Shakir, I do think that you're in a little bit of a better spot. Okay. Moving this over to our next one. David says Dobbins and Brian Robinson or Mixon and Moss. I would rather have Mixon over Brian Robinson rest of season, and I'd rather have Moss over Dobbins. So I'm going to go on the Mixon and Moss side of that. Koss says Underdog picks this week. Some of my favorite Underdog picks right now, and keep in mind, I'm sure you're all seeing this at the top of the live stream. Any Underdog picks that you do, you need to be making sure that you are using the 20% profit boost. They are dropping these like literally every single day for October. You can see I haven't used them in the past 2 days, so I believe we have 2 of them sitting here. So please make sure that you are using these if you are submitting Underdog picks. Like, for instance, like some of the 3 that we have picked out that I like. I like Harrison plus 4 receiving yards over Brandon Ayuk. I like Kenneth Walker to have higher than 88.5 total yards. I like Keon Coleman to have higher than 40.5 total yards. Here's, say, if I would have gone $10 on this, it would be $60. But if you do the 20% profit boost, that actually goes up and jumps to 70. So please just make sure you are taking advantage of the profit boost tokens. Now, Sleepy Joe says, PPR Mahomes for Devonta Smith. I'd very easily rather have Patrick Mahomes. I'm sorry, Devonta Smith there. Very, very easily. I mean, Mahomes looks like a low-end QB1. That's not much better than what you have with some of the streaming options. Drew says start Tyreek Hill or Wan'Dale Robinson. Obviously, Wan'Dale has no Malik Neighbors, so you have the expanded target share. The offenses between the two don't look like they are that much different. But my thing is here, like if you were looking at Tyreek Hill, you're going Tyreek Hill is going to be in a garbage offense with really bad quarterback play. So I don't want to start Tyreek. Wan'Dale Robinson's not in a great offense himself. So to be honest with you, I don't think about this too much. I just go ahead. I just put Tyreek Hill in. But also, like I said, I'll acknowledge that Wan'Dale had a better week last week than Tyreek's had over the past 3. And you have no Neighbors. Kyler says flex Downs, Leggett, or Ayuk. I want to stand by everybody. You have to make sure you're playing Brandon Ayuk this week. It sucks. Ayuk has not had a single week so far with 10 or more fantasy points. But going ahead and looking at this, you have Brandon Ayuk right now, higher, lower, 60.5 receiving yards. You have Josh Downs. I mean, higher, lower right now, 49.5 receiving yards. You have Leggett, higher, lower, 45.5. Like there is a tier between these guys. Brandon Ayuk is by far and away the best offense. Sportsbooks are projecting out the Niners to score the most points in the NFL this week. It's a good matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. Should be a very high-scoring game environment in general. If you have Ayuk, I know he's probably lost you a game or two so far this season. He's been horrible. I completely understand. Thank God he's not on my team. But he is somebody that you need to go through and you need to put into your lineup. Okay. Now, let's move this over. And yeah, obviously, the Bears have a great defense as well. Like, it's not a spot where you can easily say, like, oh, yeah, we want to start, look at. Obviously, you start Deontay based off target volume, but. Kiss the Ring says, is Kittle playing? Everything I can tell is trending towards George Kittle being good to go. But we don't have any recent updates. Luke says, Mason Wandale or Ayuk? I go Ayuk. Like, just to show you where Ayuk is in my rankings. I know he's been horrible. But Ayuk in my rankings this week is wide receiver 16. Rest of season, he's lower than this. Obviously, there are a lot of players out this week. There are a lot of bye weeks this week. So it does push him up a bit. But the receivers I'm considering Brandon Ayuk around are McLaurin, Wilson, Brian Thomas, DJ Moore, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman. So the tier down here where you're looking at like JSN, Wan'Dale Robinson, Josh Downs, I just don't view them in the same light. I think you have to get Ayuk in. Okay. Let's move this over to our next guy. This is Pavio says Wicks or Wilson. I will go Garrett Wilson over Dontavian Wicks. Don't feel great about it. Clearly, Wicks has a much better matchup than Wilson does. But let's move over and let's answer. We don't have too many more questions to get through flockfantasy.com. So if you actually get your question in, should definitely be answered tonight, relatively soon as well. But if you ever want to get a guaranteed answer, you can always do so through flockfantasy.com. Go to that expert advice button in the top right corner and always ask a team review, trade question, start sit question, whatever you're wanting between the three. And also, of course, if you wanted that team review, definitely the cheapest way to do it, and what I would recommend more than anything, because obviously I freaking love playing on Underdog regardless, is going and taking advantage of the Underdog offer that we have. Or if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you'll get that free Dak Prescott pick for tomorrow night, more than less than half a total yard. And on top of that, you're going to be getting a free team review over there on flockfantasy.com. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way I'm able to go through and that way I'm able to credit you with that free team review voucher like we had for Lunky Monkey here. But let's move this over to our next squad. This coming out from Hezbollah, who also that free team review voucher, drops a $10 tip. Thank you. Really do appreciate you and going to be excited to check it out. Saying, please help. We're 2-2. Stevenson and Wilson have been killing me. Gibbs on bye. Ingram's still out. Starting to run out of steam. So obviously, Ramondre Stevenson looks horrendous. I will say, side note, this does look like it's maybe an ESPN league. So you should be able to link this team with the site, my guys. So if you have any issues with that, please send in the site issue section of the Discord and have one of the developers help you. But yeah, even for you to take advantage of the free tools on the site, definitely make sure you are linking. But yeah, at this point, having to start, yeah, well, we'll get into everything. It's a 2 wide receiver double flex format. So with this being a 2 wide receiver double flex, depth is going to matter a whole lot more. So when Ramondre Stevenson gets benched, it's like, oh my gosh, do we even have another player that we can put into the lineup? It's tough. It sucks. We're not excited about it. But I mean, it is what it is. There's not much we can do about it. Going over to what we have at quarterback, we are sitting with Josh Allen. Obviously, when we have Allen, we are in a very comfortable spot where we don't need a backup quarterback, particularly in a league where you have to start up to 4 players at wide receiver. You have the double flexes. I want to make sure that we do not have that backup QB. And yeah, it looks like we don't. We have Gibbs, Goddard, Chandler, Khalil Shakir, Evan Ingram, all on the bench. This is a sucky spot. Going over to running back, we have Ramondre Stevenson and Jerome Ford. We have Trey Sermon down there in the flex. We have Gibbs in the long term, but even in the long term, this running back room's garbage. We have Jahmyr Gibbs that we can play, but beyond that, I mean, what are we doing here? What? Wait, we have no Sermon long term. Jerome Ford, when Nick Chubb comes back, not viable. That may be as early as next week. So long term, we just have Jahmyr Gibbs, and that is effectively it here. So you need to address the running back position, whether it's through trade or whether it's through waiver wire moves. We have to do something with it. Going over to wide receiver, we have Wilson, Worthy, Debo. So fine wide receiver room, right? Debo wide receiver 1, Wilson wide receiver 2, Worthy wide receiver 3. I like it. We have Shakir with the upside down there on the bench. So, I mean, this is a strong wide receiver room. No issues with it. And going over to tight end, this is what sucks. Is right now you are sitting with Evan Ingram, Dallas Goedert, and Tyler Conklin on this team. Rostering 3 tight ends is obviously garbage. It's nothing that we want to do. But I mean, we have to start Tyler Conklin this week. We have no Evan Ingram. We have no Dallas Goedert on bye. At this point, you can't cut Ingram. He was at practice. He's going to be back next week. Here's what we have to do. You have to sell Dallas Goedert. You have to sell Dallas Goedert, get a running back upgrade, send Goddard and Ford, send Goddard and Stevenson, get the best running back that you can. It opens up another roster spot for us to roster another running back. We're not having to roster 3 tight ends at that point. We bank on the Ingram upside long term. If it doesn't come through, then at that point, we're streaming tight ends anyway. So it sucks, but I think you have to sell. I think the only way out of this spot is to sell Dallas Goedert. At least that's the only thing that I see here. But I appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way. But yeah, clearly the running back room is just garbage. I think you package Goddard and Ramondre, package Goddard and Ford, and get the best running back that you can. Now, going over to Mikey's question. This says Najee versus Hawkinson. Give me Najee Harris. My running backs are Jacobs, Chuba, Chase Brown, Roshan. Yeah, I mean, you start Najee Harris here. Like, it's not, our running back room is not nearly good enough to sell Najee for Hawkinson. If you want to sell Chase Brown, if you want to sell Roshan Johnson for Hawkinson, then we do it. But especially with the Warren and Cordell Patterson injuries, I think you're just giving up way too much. Praying Mantis coming out with a massive dono. Longtime member of the flock says, we have Tua on the IR, Anthony Richardson doubtful, Darnold starting. I'm thinking about dropping for Flacco. Vikings bye week is week 6, so I may need to start Flacco next week anyway. Is Tua worth holding on with Achane and Hill? So Tua's on the IR, AR is doubtful. So if you're telling me that if Anthony Richardson misses and he's listed as out, we can move Anthony Richardson to the IR and it opens up that extra roster spot for us, yes, we drop Tua. But I just don't know if in your league you would be able to put AR in the IR slot. Obviously, if we don't have another player to put in the IR, then at that point you just hold Tua there regardless. But I mean, even when Tua comes back, even if he's going to save this offense and he will have a ton of passing volume, he could potentially lead the NFL in passing yards, passing touchdowns per game. At the same time, we can say that he has absolutely no rushing upside whatsoever. So from a fantasy football perspective, it's not like Tua is going to make a big difference. So yeah, I mean, if you could somehow move Anthony Richardson to the IR, drop Tua, and just roll with Darnold as a streamer, I think that is something that you can look to do. But I really appreciate you and really hope that we understood what we were asking there. Okay, now. Lax's Life coming out. With the start sit, we need to find a running back. We're going to go Chuba Hubbard over Zach Moss. We didn't include any quarterbacks for us to choose. Maybe we already started Baker or something. And then for the flex between Wicks, Leggett, Moss, I think with no Dobbs and no Christian Watson, Davian Wicks will be somebody that you just have to go through and start over these other two guys. Now, Gus coming out with the start sit says, flex help go. Appreciate you. Going to be excited to look at this. So primarily the best option we'll have here at wide receiver, at least, is Jacoby. Running backs, Chase Brown. I may go Chase Brown over Javonte, to be honest. If you really want Javonte, you can go with him. But at the flex spot between Jacoby Myers, Chase Brown, I'm not considering Michael Wilson. Obviously, no Laporta, no Taylor, no A.J. Brown this week. It's not the easiest situation in the world. If you look at my flex rankings this week, I had Chase Brown at running back. I'm sorry, not running back. I had him at 48 overall. I had Myers at 55 overall. And actually, since we've seen that, we've even had the implied team total go lower for the Las Vegas Raiders. So maybe making Myers an even less exciting option. Obviously, it's a brutal matchup for Jacoby Myers. So we'll go ahead and we'll take Chase Brown. We'll get the player that has a really good offense and that should be in a very high-scoring game. Now, let's move this over to Shake Koki. Appreciate you, my guy. Going to be excited to check this out. This is JSN's in Paris. This is a 12-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. We are currently 4-0, and we are number 1 with the league analyzer in rest of season value. Obviously, Justin Fields is an exciting quarterback to stream this week against the banged-up Dallas Cowboys defense. We have Jalen Hurts here in the long term. So I think, honestly, there is a chance that if Fields crushes in primetime, then, I mean, at that point, you're able to potentially go through and you're able to potentially sell Fields high after this week. Obviously, you'll never really start Fields here over Jalen Hurts. Can't get anything new. You need him now. So honestly, after this week, we're going to look to pivot off of Fields in a 2-for-1 upgrade. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. So as many 2-for-1 deals as we possibly can make, we want. We're going to be able to pick up options off the waiver wire. Going over to running back, we have 2 top 10 running backs in the long term here with Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor. Really comfortable spot to be in. I mean, if you had Jonathan Taylor and you're 0-4, I would say, oh, okay, time to panic. Time to go through and to potentially look to move off of Taylor to get production in right now. But we're 4-0, right? We can hold on to Taylor. We can bank on the long-term upside. We have James Conner to play in the short term as well. We have the upside of Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnet as guys we don't need to rely on. But if you were to get an injury into their starting lineup, say to Zach Moss or to Kenneth Walker, they immediately jump into your lineup as league winners. Going over to wide receiver, we are currently sitting with Nico Collins, so an elite wide receiver 1. Deontay Johnson, solid wide receiver 2. JSN, Kirk, Myers. We have Tucker Kraft at tight ends. It's a phenomenal team. Like, there's not much that we can possibly say with this team. It's significantly better than my squad. If we were looking to do anything here, you could potentially go ahead and look to send, say, James Conner and Tucker Kraft if Kraft crushes over the next few weeks. And a 2-for-1 deal to get a better tight ends. Knowing that if we get Taylor back, Kraft crushes with no Watson, with no Wicks, with no Dobbs, then all of a sudden he sees a little more target competition later on. We don't necessarily need the running back depth anymore once we get Jonathan Taylor back in and Jahmyr Gibbs already through his bye. I think that's like the only thing you could possibly do with this team. But overall, I mean, it's a 4-0 squad where we are currently number 1 in the league analyzer, right? So it's going to be hard for me to come up with much. But let's move this over to Himbaki. This is Tyreek and Rachaad White versus Bijan and Terry McLaurin. Give me Tyreek over Bijan. Give me McLaurin over White. We also have, honestly, I don't really care about our starting lineup. It's still wide receiver, running back for wide receiver, running back, 2-for-2 deal. It's just your personal preference. Can y'all spam the chat? What side would y'all rather have here? Would y'all rather have Tyreek Hill and Rachaad White or Terry McLaurin and Bijan Robinson? What side are you taking? Obviously, y'all made it very clear that I'm not allowed to answer Bijan Robinson questions anymore. So if I can't answer Bijan questions anymore, you know what y'all are doing. We got Bijan. So those look like everybody wants the Bijan side. We got maybe one or two Tyreeks mixed in. But I'll add it to it. Hook 'em Lawrence. Let's go Bijan Robinson. I think once Tua comes back, Tyreek absolutely crushes Bijan, though. Okay. Let's move this over to Corops, always out here asking questions. This is where we trade Etienne and Jacobs for Jahmyr Gibbs. It's a league. The league settings were filled out. It's a 10-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. I don't know if these are correct. If they are correct, it's an absolute no-brainer. You go through and you take the Jahmyr Gibbs side. I honestly don't even need to think about it at all. I mean, I will say both Travis Etienne and Josh Jacobs for me are some of my favorite buy low candidates, in that if you look at the projections from sportsbooks at the moment, they are telling us that this Jags team and this Jags offense will be much better going into the future than what it has been so far. And at the same time, I'm a believer in this Packers offense. It looks like Jacobs does have a 3-down role. So for sure, like, I want to be on record that I do think that both Etienne and Jacobs are solid buy low candidates. But with that being said, I don't know. It is a toughish spot to pass on Jahmyr Gibbs, the best player in the deal, running behind the best offensive line in the NFL. Especially if it's a 10-team league, we're going to start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, where presumably we have enough depth here. But CD88 says, hey, Mason, 8-team full PBR double flex. We need some help. All right. Jayden Reed, you have to start this week. There's no way in hell that you cannot start Reed, where you have no Watson, you have no Dobbs. Reed has been the most efficient, or one of the most efficient receivers in the league so far this season, and the targets are now going to go up. Going down to the flexes, I think you have to play Chris Olave. Don't love the matchup going up against the Chiefs. And then most spots, I think you have to play Brandon Ayuk this week. However, in an 8-team league, I think you can just take the guaranteed touches that you're going to get with James Conner. Not super excited about it, however. Knowing that in an 8-team format, I think other league mates will have better flex options, specifically with Conner not having the receiving usage, and at the same time with James Conner having a brutal matchup going up against the Niners. Now, Rainey coming out with a start set. We have Nico Collins, Drake London at wide receiver. So if we already started London, we just need a high floor with the rest of the lineup. To have Trey Tucker here at the flex, I would really like to pivot off of Trey Tucker if we possibly could. Like I said, obviously Tucker's been great over the past 2 weeks, but if you look at sportsbooks, they're telling us that this will be the worst offense in the NFL this next week. It's a really bad matchup. I think he's the third target in it. But could I start Justin Watson over him? No. Could I start Emmanuel Wilson over him? No. Could I start Trey Benson over him? No. Could I start Kendrick Bourne over him? No. You have no St. Brown. You have no Smith this week. So honestly, I don't think you have any other option but to leave this lineup as is. But let's move this over and answer some of the free questions that we have in the live chat. Please, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Would be happy to try to answer as many as we possibly can for y'all. Derp, I know we got to update Sermon in our rankings week 5. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you for reminding me. Cole says Bowers or Ferguson's. I think Ferguson, you get the bump, of course, knowing that you have no Brandon Cooks. You have no Devontae Adams in Las Vegas. I think both options are great. I think if you wanted to wait until the morning and see what the overall weather's like for the Pittsburgh-Dallas game, I think you could go ahead and do just that. I don't know. I mean, Bowers was extremely disappointing last week. But at the same time, if you look at the first 2 weeks, I believe he was averaging 8 targets a game. But it says Raiders offense just can't be trusted. Yeah, if you look at the updated implied team totals, where they moved the Raiders down even further with the amount of points they're projecting them to score this week, the sportsbooks that is, I think you can go ahead and bench Bowers for Ferguson. It's very tough. I definitely ranked Bowers over Ferguson at the beginning of the week, though. Romain says Flacco or Trevor Lawrence. Let me pull up the updated totals that we have for these offenses. Applied team totals week 5. And also want to see exactly how much Lawrence has been running the ball so far this season. I'll tell you right now, everybody's going to say Flacco in the chat, but I think they probably could be wrong, to be honest. Looking at this, the Jags project out as the 7th highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. Right now, the offenses that project out to score more points, and this is according to Las Vegas Sportsbooks, who I stand by, they know more than you do. They know more than I do. They know more than everybody does. The only teams that project out to be better are the Texans, Chiefs, Seahawks, Ravens, Packers, Niners, in terms of points scored in their respective offense. Looking at the Colts are down at 21.25 points. The Jags are 3-point favorites here. We know Joe Flacco will not have a single rushing yard. Well, at least I'm going to assume he won't. Let me see what we have with Lawrence and if he's running the ball at all. Because if we're getting like 15 rushing yards a game from Lawrence, I'd probably go Trevor here. If he's not running it at all. Actually, you are getting close to 15 rushing yards per game. Not consistently. But so far this season, we've had 61 rushing yards through the first 4 weeks. Very funny that we pulled that 15 number out of our butt. And what has Flacco done? Both, obviously, this week and then what we had last year. 3 rushing yards this week. Last year, yeah, literally nothing running at all. Last year, he had 2 total rushing yards, 6 total rushing yards the year prior. And I know this sounds dumb that we're nitpicking things like this, and just to let you know, like I'm just trying to give y'all my honest thoughts on why I say what I say. And 100%, like you can determine, Mason, your process is garbage. It makes no sense. Joe Flacco's going to be better. He's going to beat the 0-4 Jags. 100%, that's your process. You can go by it. I'm just trying to give you my point of view. And my point of view is I believe that sportsbooks have more knowledge than the vast, vast majority of the public, and I include myself in the public. They're telling us the Jags will score about 3 more points, or that's the projection. And we're going to get an additional 15 rushing yards expectation for Lawrence in comparison to Flacco. Those 15 rushing yards are equivalent to about another 37.5 passing yards if you just look at the way that fantasy points are broken down. I probably go Lawrence over Flacco, but I know a lot of people probably won't like it. Russ Baller says start Xavier Worthy or Dontavian Wicks. I think you have to go Wicks. Let's see. Braden says trade Debo and James Conner for Breece Hall. I would. I mean, I have James Conner in the Flock League. I'm a little bit concerned with Conner that he's not catching the ball at all. Like the receiving usage is just not there whatsoever. Kiss the Ring says Brian Thomas Jr. in a rainy game or Brandon Ayuk. I would rather have Brian Thomas. AJ says Addison or Flowers in the flex. Obviously, you have not had much passing volume in Baltimore over the past 2 weeks. I think that they possibly are forced to throw the ball a little bit more here against the Cincinnati Bengals. So I would prefer to just go ahead and take the Baltimore receiver in Flowers. But one like away from 800 likes on the stream. If you have not done so already, hit that like button. We've been live for over 3.5 hours. We have live stream for over 5 hours every single day this week, answering as many of your questions as you can. So hit that like button if you have not done so. And let's go. And I don't think we have too many more questions to get through on flockfantasy.com. So let's make sure we answer all of them tonight. And of course, if you wanted to get that guaranteed answer over there on flockfantasy.com, you can always go over to the site. Go to the button in the top right corner. That is expert advice. You can ask a trade question, start sit question, team review, whatever you're wanting. If you want that team review, definitely the best way to get it is going to be going ahead and taking advantage of the offer that we have with Underdog Fantasy. Or if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you will also be getting a Dak Prescott free pick, more than less than half a total yard. And you'll get that free team review over there on flockfantasy.com. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your Underdog Fantasy account. That way we know who to credit with that free team review voucher. Let's answer this trade question from Biker. This is Worthy and Godwin versus Tyreek and Roschon. I would rather have Tyreek here. I'm valuing Roschon as almost nothing in this deal. But I'm viewing like a high-end wide receiver 2 rest of season, a low-end wide receiver 2 rest of season for Tyreek, who right now is obviously worse than Godwin in the short term, but I think Tyreek could be wide receiver 1 overall in the long term. So I'd rather have Tyreek. Now, this is another trade question from the same person. And real quick, let's back out and get back in here. I apologize. We are back. This is another question from Biker, where, like I said, we wanted Tyreek on the first one. This is a trade where we send London for Smith to downgrade, Dobbins to Brian Robinson to upgrade, Pickens to Higgins to upgrade. I want the best player here as well. I don't like either trade. I want the best player in both deals. I mean, I'm completely fine if you want to say, hey, Mason, Kirk Cousins is not going to have 500 passing yards every single week going into the future. And if you really wanted to go through and if you really wanted to see if we could squeeze some value out of Drake London and sell him and pivot to an elite receiver, I just don't think this is the pivot. I just don't think you are getting enough here with London. Okay. Let's move this over to D-Lou. It's a start-sit question. It says, need help with running back 2 in the flex spots. Moss or Ford / Wicks. All help will be appreciated. Okay. I'm going to go Zach Moss over Jerome Ford, just expecting this to be a much better offense in Cincinnati. And then for the flex, there's no way that you can go with anybody other than Dontavian Wicks. Going back to what we were looking at with the implied team totals, right now sportsbooks currently have the Packers as the second highest scoring offense in the NFL this week, only behind the Niners. You absolutely, Jaden Reed's a top 10 receiver very easily, and Dontavian Wicks is a phenomenal flex play. It's another question from D-Lou. Says, need help at running back. What are your thoughts on this trade? Would you do it? And what would you counter? So Adams to Walker, massive upgrade. Moss to Shaheed, slight downgrade. I think you're getting the best player in the deal with Kenneth Walker. If you want to see if they offered you this and you want to see if we can squeeze a little more value out of them, right now, if you want to see if we can swap them David Njoku and Evan Ingram, go, hey, I'll do the deal, but give me David Njoku instead of Evan Ingram. I think that would be very appealing with Ingram's injuries lingering a little longer. But let's move this over to Dank Hamster. We're going to skip over the team reviews for just 1 second. It says, this is the most stuck I've ever been setting in a lineup. The team might be too deep. So wide receiver options here are Tyreek, Dontavian Wicks. Oh, Jaden Reed must start name. I mean, it doesn't matter. You start Jaden Reed over Tyreek this week. Going over to running back, you have no Joe Mixon. So we're not that deep. We're deep at wide receiver. But you can't start Mixon. You can't start Keaton Mitchell. We're going to have to pick up somebody off the waiver wire. And then going over to what we have at the flex, Tyreek and Dontavian Wicks. You bench Jackson Smith and Jigba. You bench Terry McLaurin. Actually, I think you can go Terry McLaurin over Wicks. Can I see what the projections are on Underdog right now with these guys? Please play Tyreek. But actually, let's not just look at Jordan Love. Let's look at Packers. So right now you have for the Packers, Jordan Love, higher, lower, 261.5 passing yards. Dontavian Wicks, higher, lower, 56.5. The issue that you have with the Commanders, I believe they only have Jaden Daniels at 200.5 passing yards. You have McLaurin at 53.5. So I think it's very close between McLaurin and Wicks. When in doubt, I typically go with the guy with the larger sample, but that's just me. But if you wanted to go Wicks or McLaurin, I wouldn't fault you at all for it. Just do not start JSN over either one. Now, Macho Man coming out. Here at wide receiver, we are going to go through and we're going to play who actually, never mind, I forgot. We have Wandale. We're going to go Wandale here at receiver. For quarterback, we're going to go Mahomes over Dalton. And then for the flex, I think we go back to receiver, and I think you go Josh Downs, assuming that we have Joe Flacco. And if Flacco does not play, we go Shaheed. If you have Anthony Richardson instead, you go Shaheed. Now, BHZ, this is A.J. Brown and Benson for Malik Neighbors. Say, hey, Mason, in addition to the players, I add a first-round pick to A.J. Brown and Benson and get back Neighbors in the third. So is this a dynasty league? If this is a dynasty league, A.J. Brown a first versus Malik Neighbors, that's close. I'd rather have A.J. Brown and redraft over Neighbors the rest of the season. You're going to get an extra game from A.J. Brown. He'll already be through the bye. I'd rather have Benson than the third. The first in dynasty is what swings it. If you're telling me you're getting an extra first, if it is a super flex dynasty league, you give me the Malik Neighbors side. If it is a super flex dynasty league. Now, K-Chin says, was missing two players, Colby Parkinson and Trey Sermon. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Obviously, we are starting Parkinson here. If we have Trey Sermon, we play Alexander Madison, and you can go Trey Sermon over Chase Brown. I'd probably do if we have Joe Flacco. Like I said, Flacco's going to be better where Flacco's not going to steal the rushing touchdowns, and you will check the ball down a little bit more. And going to the flex, you can't think about anybody other than Dontavian Wicks here. But here with this slot, I think we do go Sermon, my friend. But really do appreciate y'all. And thank you again for hanging out with us. And Syncrosity, my guy, yeah, I agree. $79 for a team review is very high. So we should do either one of two things. We should offer it for $10 if you use promo code FLOCK when you sign up to Underdog Fantasy. Or we should change these live streams from live streaming 5 hours every single day to live streaming for 24 hours every single day so we can move the team reviews down to being $5. We got one of two options here. We can either stream for 5 hours a day answering questions and do 2 videos every single day as well and have 0 life. Or we can charge $5 for the team review and I will probably have to start taking Adderall and stream for 24/7. And God knows what else we would do. But yeah, of course, if y'all wanted a team review, definitely recommend going through Underdog Fantasy. If you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy and make a $10 deposit, you get a free team review over there on flockfantasy.com. Plus, you get that free Dak Prescott pick, more than less than half a total yard for that Sunday night. And you get that 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. But if you wanted that free team review over there on flockfantasy.com, just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way we're able to go through and accredit you with that free team review voucher. And yeah, of course, if you ever wanted to ask any questions over on flockfantasy.com, whether that's a team review, trade question, start sit question, just go over to the button in the top right corner that says expert advice. And here you can get anything that you want. But I really do appreciate y'all. I'm sorry. Usually, obviously, this is the first stream that we've done this week where we haven't gone for 5 hours. This one slightly under 4. But as y'all can tell, I'm extremely tired. I need to wake up in about 7 hours so we can stream for 5 hours in the morning leading up to kickoff. I really appreciate y'all. Really hope that we were able to help you out in some way with this stream. Wishing the best of luck. And of course, I'll be live streaming all morning tomorrow morning. If you ask any questions on the site, they'll be answered first thing in the morning. You'll get sent the answer through the site as well. So even if you're not in the stream, you will see it. But thank you again. I really do appreciate y'all hanging out with me. And I really hope I get to hang out with you in the stream tomorrow morning.